Marvel. Magic floating cloak choose me. Kamar Taj magicians are shocked. Chapter 1. In front of Zongcheng High School. A little man about 1.6 meters tall put his arm around the shoulders of a fat man next to him and said enthusiastically, "Hey, Ned, we finally have summer vacation. By the way, what are you going to do in the summer? There will be a technology company in Manhattan in a week. Do you want to go to Zon?" This little man's name is Peter Parker. He has an ordinary name, an ordinary surname, and an ordinary person. Even compared to his other classmates, his nerd status is even more looked down upon. So he cherished his only friend, Ned Leeds. Ned glanced at the little man holding his shoulder. It was hard to believe that this guy would become the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man in the future. But his face, which bears a vague resemblance to the Dutch brother, and the interview he saw with Iron Man Tony Stark a few days ago, all reminded him deeply that this unattractive little man was the future Iron Man. Spider-Man's own son. "Sorry, Peter, I have plans for the summer vacation. It's a pity that I can't go to the science and technology exhibition with you." Ned looked at Peter aside and said regretfully, "It's okay, you don't need to apologize, I can do it myself." Although Peter said this, anyone with a discerning eye could see the disappointment on his face. "Hey, Peter, don't be like this. I'll give you a surprise when I come back. I guarantee you'll like it." Ned saw Peter's disappointed look and patted him on the shoulder. "Yeah, thank you, Ned." After separating from Peter, Ned walked alone on the street, secretly thinking about what to do during the next summer vacation, or to be precise, how to successfully attract the attention of the Ancient One to learn magic. That's right, this Ned is no longer the fat little black man he was before. He was originally a good young man from a flower gardener in another universe. On a night of thunderstorms, lightning and thunder, a bolt of lightning fell from the sky and split him into Nick Fury. And his soul was wandering in confusion for who knows how long. In short, by the time he regained consciousness, he was already Ned. After understanding his identity and the general situation of the world, Ned, who had watched Spider-Man No Home, made up his mind that he must go to Kamar Taj to learn magic and not waste his talent. "Judging from the fact that I can open a portal with just a random drawing in the movie, if I start learning magic before Ultron is born, and learn about the arrival of Thanos, I won't believe that I can't deal with a mere purple sweet potato." As for returning home, Ned, who was born in an orphanage and has never done well, said that there was nothing left to miss in that world. But although you have to learn magic, magic is not that easy to learn. After all, the recruitment of Kamar Taj depends on sincerity and experience. It is no exaggeration to say that every magician in Kamar Taj has his own story. And if he just came to the door like this, Ji Yuyi would definitely not accept him. After all, although he was extremely talented, Ji Yuyi must not have known it before he started studying. If she knew better, Doctor Strange wouldn't be considered her successor in the movie. After all, isn't Ned good? So how to successfully join Kamar Taj to learn magic is a question that requires careful consideration. After returning home, he had a quick dinner, and Ned went to bed early. After all, he was going to apply for a mage job tomorrow, so he had to be energetic. The next day, "Grandma, I'm out." Ned drank a glass of milk, grabbed a piece of bread and shouted towards the back room. Then he quickly left the house regardless of whether the people inside responded. Taking the subway to Manhattan, Ned took a taxi and successfully arrived at Bleecker Street. 177A Bleecker Street, secretly thought of the address in his mind, and Ned searched for it with all his energy. As a Marvel movie fan, Ned naturally remembers the address Doctor Strange left for Thor in Thor 3. Relying on Ned's intelligence and keen observation, he soon found the New York Temple, and saw that there was a unique symbol of Kamar Taj on it. Ned looked up at the sign and excitedly stepped forward to ring the doorbell. "Who are you looking for?" After the door opened, a black mage wearing a mage robe and having the same hairstyle as Nick Fury came out. He looked at Ned, frowned and asked in confusion, "I." Before Ned could speak, a benevolent female voice came from inside. "Master Daniel, let him in." After hearing what the man inside said, Daniel felt more doubtful, but he still let Ned in as he was told. Ned entered the temple and saw two people standing in the temple. One was a bald white woman, and the other, it didn't matter what the other one was, the key now was why was the Ancient One here. Originally, Ned's plan was to sneak into the temple under the banner of the Ancient One, and then find an opportunity to show off his unique magical talent, such as touching the magic weapons in the temple. Then he would use this to alarm Ancient One and follow her to learn magic. After all, as long as his talent was exposed, and Ancient One must know Ned's identity, he would not refuse her request to learn magic. But facing the Ancient One directly at this time directly disrupted Ned's plan, leaving him a little confused as to what to do. Mr. Leeds, you seem to have arrived 12 years too early. Ancient One looked at the surprised Ned and said with a smile, you seem to know me. Of course not, I'm sorry, I went to the wrong place. After Ned said that, he turned around and walked out the door. After all, he knew that any lie would be absolutely vulnerable in front of Ji Yuyi, so he didn't even have the intention to try, and just planned to leave directly. But as soon as Ned turned around, he found that the way out was blocked by Daniel. At this time, Ji Yuyi's voice came from behind again. Mr. Leeds, you seem to be a little different. When Ned heard Ancient One's voice, he quickly turned around and wanted to face Ancient One head on. Unexpectedly, as soon as he turned around, he found that Ji Yuyi was already in front of him, and at the same time, he slapped his chest with a palm. Then Ned felt a sense of lightness, and there was a floating body in his field of vision. I looked down at myself again, and sure enough, my whole body was in a transparent, spirit body state. Ned naturally knew what was going on, and immediately lost all thoughts, letting the Ancient One control it. Even if he had no thoughts or not, he would be manipulated. The Ancient One stared at Ned's spirit body for a moment, then said, sorry. Then he twisted his palm in the void, and Ned's spiritual body and physical body automatically merged together, and then slowly merged. After Ned's spirit body returned to his physical body, he touched his body with lingering fear, and then looked at Ancient One in shock. After all, although Ned knew that the Ancient One could make people leave the body with a single blow, he knew that experiencing it personally was different after all. Mr. Leeds, I'm sorry for what I did just now, but as I said, you came 10 years earlier, and Ji Yuyi said, suddenly stopped talking and turned his back. Ned couldn't help but feel a little disappointed when he saw this, but he also knew that people like Ancient One were the most stubborn and would not change their decisions unless there were no major accidents. He had no choice but to bow slightly to Ji Yuyi, then turn around and walk out the door. But as soon as Ned took a few steps, he felt someone pat his shoulder. He turned around in confusion, only to see Ancient One and two other mages looking at him in disbelief a few steps away. Even Ji Yuyi looked shocked and didn't even notice that the teacup in his hand was tilted. Ned was a little confused when he saw this and was about to speak when he felt something caressing his face again. Looking sideways in confusion, he saw a red cloth draped over his shoulders, and he kept touching his face gently. Ned looked at the unknown mirror beside him in shock. Sure enough, he saw a red cloak draped on his back, and it was still fluttering, as if it was also very excited. Magic floating cloak. This is impossible. A black mage next to Ji Yuyi said in shock. This person's voice also brought Ji Yuyi back to his senses. She picked up the teacup in her hand and said, no, maybe I was wrong. Mr. Leeds, do you really want to learn magic? Ned heard this and quickly replied, yes. This answer was obviously expected by Ji Yuyi. Well, then please go home and prepare yourself. Starting from tomorrow until your school starts classes, you will stay at Kamatage for the next few months. Learn magic. Okay, Ned said and was about to leave. At the same time, he tried to take off the cloak on his back. After all, wearing a cloak while walking on the street would be too unique. Today is not Halloween. But he still pulled hard and the cloak hung tightly on his back, and he couldn't get it off no matter what. Seeing this, the Ancient One said, Ned, it has chosen you, you can take him away. Upon hearing this, Ned could only say, thank you, Master Ancient One. Then he hurriedly left the temple. Watching Ned leave, Ji Yuyi took a sip of tea and whispered, Mr. Leeds, you are indeed a little different. Grandma, one of my classmates helped me find a good job, but it's a bit far away. It's in Washington, D.C., and you can stay there, so I'll live there for the next time. Ned returned home. Said to Grandma while eating. Well, when the child grows up, he will eventually have to go out on his own. Although Ned's grandmother was older and had gray hair, she did not restrain Ned. Thank you, Grandma. The next day. Hey, Master Daniel, I'm here. Ned said excitedly when he came to the New York temple, with a magic floating cloak behind him. But the person who met him this time was not the Daniel mage he met last time, but the black mage who had been standing next to Ji Yi yesterday. I am Baron Mordo, a disciple of Master Ancient One. You can call me Mordo. I will teach you the basics of magic in the following time. Mordo said to Ned. Okay, Master Mordo, Ned replied. After listening to Ned's words, Mordo turned and walked behind him, saying as he walked, Taj is actually not here. This is just a temple established by Taj. Every temple has a path leading to Taj's portal. Finally, Mordo led Ned through several corridors and stopped in front of a mirror-like object. This is the portal leading to Taj, follow me. After Mordo finished speaking, he walked directly in. Upon seeing this, Ned quickly followed. Hey, Master Mordo, where are we going? Ned asked after following Master Mordo. At the same time, looking at the retro buildings around him, Ned felt a little restless. I will take you to see Master Ji Yi first, and then go to the house where you will live. Mordo said expressionlessly. But if Ned observed carefully, he could find that Mordo's eyes were always looking at him. Mordo still hasn't figured out what's so different about Ned that he can actually make the always arrogant magic floating cloak stick upside down. After a while, Mordo took Ned to a wooden house, where Ancient One was sitting and drinking tea. Seeing Ned come in, Ancient One greeted politely, Hi, Mr. Leeds. The Ancient One, Ned replied. This is the hanging ring you need to use next, keep it well. Ancient One stood up and walked to Ned and handed him a hanging ring and said, Taj's magic comes from Emperor Weixin, and the hanging ring is the bridge that communicates magic. I understand, Master Ancient One. Ned took the hanging ring respectfully and said. Okay, Mordo, you can take Mr. Leeds to his room. Seeing that Ned had no problem, Ji Yi said to Mordo. Okay, come with me, Mr. Leeds. After finishing speaking, Mordo turned and walked toward the door. Actually you can call me Ned, I won't mind. Ned said, following Mordo's footsteps. Okay, Mr. Leeds, this is your house, Mordo said as he took Ned to a wooden house. Then he handed him a piece of paper and said, you can tidy up your house, change into a mage uniform, and then go to the library to borrow magic books. If you don't understand, you can ask me. Of course, you can also go to the square outside. Learn physical skills and practice magic with other mages. Okay, thank you, Ned said, taking the note. Do you have any questions? Mordo asked confusedly when he saw Ned taking the note and taking a look at it, then casually holding it in his hand. Isn't this the WIF password? Ned said with a smirk. You should tidy up the house first. After saying this, Mordo turned around and left. At the same time, his already dark face seemed to get darker again. Hi, sir, I'm Ned Leeds. I'm here to borrow books. Ned came to the library and said to the librarian with an Asian face who was as tall as himself. Hello, Mr. Leeds, Master Ancient One has told you that you can read these books first. Wong saw Leeds coming over and put a stack of books on the table and said, these are some basic magic knowledge, and a few simple arcane magics. Okay, thank you, and you can call me Ned. Ned took the stack of books handed over by the king and said with a smile. King. The king responded casually and ignored Ned. Ned didn't care when he saw this, and left the library holding the book. Returning to his cabin, Ned put the book aside, looked at the hanging ring on the table, and suddenly had a bold idea. I saw Ned picking up the hanging ring and putting it on his left hand, and then bowed slightly, with his left hand in front and his right hand behind, probably the way Strange looked when practicing the portal in Doctor Strange, constantly thinking about it in his mind as if he was in the bedroom at home. His right hand slowly turned clockwise. Sure enough, Ned's right hand waved slightly twice, and with the sound of stab, sparks, a portal with sparks slowly opened in front of him. The other side of the portal was Ned's bedroom. Yes, Ned excitedly waved his fist when he saw this. Although he knew he could succeed, the excitement he felt when he actually opened the portal was still undiminished. After a while, after the excitement passed, Ned also faced the same problem as Ned in No Return of a Hero, that is, the portal cannot be closed. Oh, shit. Ned hurriedly opened the last book in the pile of books given to him by the king, which was the book that recorded a few simple magic spells. Turning to the last few pages, I saw that the portal magic was indeed recorded on it. Ned hurriedly looked at how to close it, only to find The magic above is actually written in Sanskrit. Shet. Ned quickly took out his mobile phone, connected it to WIF, opened Google Translate, and silently recited the magic spell several times. Then he closed the book, stood up and faced the portal, with a serious look on his face. Again his left hand was in front and his right hand was behind him. The difference from before was that this time his right hand was swinging counterclockwise. As Ned's right hand slowly swings, the portal also closes. Woo! Ned let out a heavy breath, and then began to read the magic book. It was not until night that he slowly put down the magic book in his hand. At the same time, he had read all the books the king gave him. And for some reason, after he read it, he didn't forget any of the content, as if he had the gift of photographic memory. Ned put down the book, picked up the hanging ring, went to the dining hall to have dinner and then lay on the bed to sleep. It had to be said that studying magic all day long was indeed very energy-consuming. Thinking of this, Ned couldn't help but think of the magic that allowed Strange to learn while sleeping. Early the next morning, Ned returned to the cabin after breakfast. He sorted out the books that the king gave him yesterday and planned to return them. He also asked the king for some more profound magic books and also wanted to ask the Ancient One. Can I learn the magic of out-of-body spirituality, so that I can keep going day and night? But at this moment, there was a bang 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 knock on the door. Ned opened the door in confusion, only to find Mordo standing at the door, and said, "Hey, Mordo, come in." Modu didn't sit down after he came in and said, "Didn't you go out to practice magic yesterday? I've been waiting for you in the square all day." All day. When Modu spoke, his tone was the same as usual, and he didn't yell, but anyone could hear his bad mood. When Ned saw this, he quickly said, "I'm Oh Sao Rui, I have been reading the book for a day." "Oh, by the way, that is the book that the king gave me. He said it was told by Master Ji Yu Yi." Ned said and pointed to the books stacked on the table. Modu obviously also knew about the magic books, and said, "I know, Master Ji Yu Yi also told me, but you have to know that there is an old saying in the mysterious East, reading thousands of books is worse than traveling thousands of miles. You've been reading, have you finished it? Have you finished reading?" Just as Mordo was speaking, Ned opened a portal leading to the library in front of him, and then said to Mordo, "You were right, Mordo, I promise you will go to the square today. Practice, but before that I need to return the books and borrow some more." After Ned finished speaking, he hugged the books on the table and walked through the portal to the library. "Oh, Shet, have you finished reading it? Wit power, wait for me." Mordo could not be surprised when he saw this, and hurriedly followed Ned before he closed the portal and said, "Have you finished reading those books?" Quote, "Yes, I have finished reading it and I have remembered it. This is the library, please don't yell," Ned said as he walked with the book in his arms. "Hey, Wong, I'm here to return the book. By the way, do you have any other books to recommend to me?" Ned walked to the king and put a pile of books in his hand on the table. Wit. Before the king could speak, Mordo ran to Ned first and said, "What did you say? You remember everything. How is that possible?" "Okay, even if you memorize everything, how can you learn the portal in one day?" Mordo said incoherently to Ned. "Ah, Modu." Wong looked at the uncharacteristic Modu and interrupted in confusion, "What did you say?" "He has read these books. And he learned the portal in one day." After Wong finished speaking, he and Mordo turned their attention to Ned. Ned nodded upon seeing this, shrugged and said, "Yes, I didn't expect it to be so easy. Besides, I don't just know how to use portals." After saying that, Ned took a few steps back, crossed his hands in front of his chest, then turned sharply, and then quickly separated the action of Doctor Strange summoning two small handheld magic shields when Squidward invaded the Earth at the beginning of Avengers 3. Then two rings of Ragador, small magic shields, the kind used by Ancient One for close combat, appeared on Ned's left and right hands respectively. "Oh, Shet. Oh, Shet." Wong and Mordo saw Ned's actions and cursed at the same time. "Modo, did you just say that he also learned the portal?" Wong looked at the ring of Ragador in Ned's hand and asked Mordo with some doubts about life. "That's right, what else is in the book you gave him? Tell me quickly, and I promise there won't be any more surprises." Modu nodded and swallowed deeply. "No more, only these two kinds of magic, I promise." Wang Yi swallowed and replied. "Modu, please stop making such a fuss. King, I have already read the book you gave me. Please recommend some more books to me. Ned put away the magic shield in his hand and stepped forward and said to the king. Ned. At this moment, a voice came from behind Ned. When Wang and Modu saw the visitor, they hurriedly bowed slightly and said respectfully, Your Majesty. Ned turned around when he heard this and said, The Ancient One Mage. Ji Yuyi nodded, and then said, You go back first and find me in my room later. I will personally teach you magic in the next time. Upon hearing this, Ned quickly replied, Yes, the Ancient One Mage. Your Majesty, Ned has promised me that he will practice physical skills with me today. Modu, who was standing aside, said quickly when he saw this, thinking, No matter how talented you are in magic, you are still a novice in physical skills. Look at me. Master Modu teaches you how to be a good person. Single quote. After hearing what Mordo said, Ji Yuyi also looked at Ned strangely, and then said, Okay, then come see me again in the afternoon, and you and Mordo will practice physical skills together in the morning. After hearing what Ancient One said, Ned nodded and said, Okay, Master Ancient One. After Ned said that, he was about to open the portal and go back. Ned, because you just came to Karma Taj yesterday, you may not know that except for special circumstances, the use of magic is prohibited in the library. Ancient One saw Ned trying to open the portal, said with a smile. After hearing what Ancient One said, Ned quickly stopped and said, I'm sorry, Master Ancient One. It's okay, you can go back. Ji Yuyi said with a smile. Yes. Ned bowed slightly and walked away quickly. Sir, then I will go to the square and wait for Ned. Mordo said that he really wanted to beat up a magic genius. After hearing Modu's words, Ji Yuyi nodded without saying anything. Modu nodded when he saw Ji Yu and left quickly. After Mordo and Ned both left, Ancient One looked slightly distracted as he looked at the direction Ned was leaving. Venerable. Wang looked at Ji Yuyi who was a little distracted and called out in confusion. He had never seen the Ancient One like this, although Ned's talent was indeed a bit too good. Hearing the king's voice, Ancient One came back to his senses, looked at the king, and said, It's okay, maybe I was wrong, Ned will be the best among us. After saying that, he ignored the king and left leisurely. Wang looked at Ji Yuyi's leaving figure, touched the back of his head, and then returned to his seat to continue listening to music and reading. Although we are mystical magicians, we also need to learn physical skills, because Kamataj's magician tradition is close combat. Many secret magics assist us in close combat, such as the Ring of Ragador magic shield and the Crimson Chain of Satoric used by Doctor Strange to entangle Thanos when the Titans of Avengers took off Thanos' gloves. Tyrant's Hand, pulling Thanos' red magic rope. And Emperor Wyshan's sacred sword, the flaming knife that Doctor Strange held in his hand to cut Thanos when the three Titans of Avengers besieged Thanos, and so on. Mordo said in the square, looking at Ned in front of him. Ned curled his lips when he heard this, and thought to himself, not only Karmataj, but also a certain first mage of the 9 realms in Asgard is deeply obsessed with melee combat. Single quote. Hey, don't be distracted during the battle. Just as Ned was cursing in his heart, Mordo shouted and directly used magic to conjure a stick to hit Ned. Upon seeing this, Ned quickly summoned a magic shield to resist. There were only a few, bang bang bang, sounds, and all Mordo's attacks hit the magic shield. Ned breathed a sigh of relief when he saw this and laughed. Ha ha ha. Mordo, you can't do this. Fortunately, you are still one of the best masters of Kamataj. Even a little otaku like me who has never practiced fighting can't deal with it. Quote. Hearing Ned's laughter, Modu didn't take it seriously and said, Come again. Then he hit Ned with the magic stick again. And this time Mordo was no longer as straightforward as the previous attacks, but gave full play to his skills. After only 3 attacks, Ned was unable to resist and was hit several times. After a while, Ned found that Mordo seemed to be playing a trick on him. He would not defeat him, but would give himself a stick from time to time. He said, Okay, I know you are powerful, stop it, I give up. Seeing this, Modu held up the stick conjured by magic and said, This is not possible. How can we protect the earth without any willpower? Come again. After Mordo finished speaking, he swung the stick and hit Ned repeatedly, hitting him on the side and thigh, causing Ned to suffer unspeakably. Ouch. Mordo, are you really not going to hold back? Ned, who was bruised and swollen, covered his lower back and looked at Mordo and said. Just now, Mordo tripped Ned up with a stick, and then hit Ned directly on the waist with another stick. Mordo looked at Ned, holding back his smile and said, okay, that's it for today. Go and have a rest. After lunch, go find Master Ancient One. After Mordo said that, he left as if running away, for fear that Ned would come after him to fight for his life. Master Ancient One, I'm here. Ned came to Ancient One's wooden house after a brief rest after lunch. Please sit down, Ned. Ancient One sat at the table and motioned to Ned. After hearing this, Ned walked over and sat across from Ancient One, waiting quietly for Ancient One to speak. Ancient One poured Ned a cup of tea in a leisurely manner and said, the language of magic is as old as human civilization. Ancient mages called this language spells. We draw energy from other dimensions of the multiverse, to cast spells, conjure shields and weapons, create magic. As Ji Yuyi spoke, he waved his hands, summoning one small magic circle after another, and finally arranged them together and slowly dissipated. After the magic circle dissipated, Ancient One looked at Ned and said, Ned, your magic talent is the best among the people I have ever seen. So how much do you know about this world? Ned heard this and replied, Boom. As soon as Ned said a word, Ancient One put his palm on the top of Ned's head and pressed his thumb on Ned's forehead. Then Ned felt his body begin to rise rapidly, crashing through the roof, flying into the sky, flying out of the earth, flying out of the universe, seeing various mysterious latitudes, penetrating the barrier of the multiverse, and seeing the colorful multiverse, and a pair of evil eyes. Then he plummeted again, crossing countless latitudes back to Ji Yuyi's wooden house and back to the small table. Ned suddenly woke up. The shock of visiting the multiverse made him unable to recover for a long time. What do you think, Mr. Leeds? Ancient One looked at Ned, who was supporting his body with his arms, and asked with a smile. Ned gasped and touched the teacup on the table with trembling hands. This tea is still warm. This is what you need to learn next. Work hard, Ned. Ancient One pushed a stack of books to Ned and said. Yeah, Ned replied as he drank the tea in the cup and looked at the book on the table. In the following time, Ned went back and forth between the wooden house, the dining hall, the square, and the Ancient One's house. A few months passed in the blink of an eye, and Ned also learned about mirror space, out-of-body experiences, etc. More than 20 magic spells, both difficult and easy. Ned, I advise you to go back and pack your things quickly. I don't want to beat you up again before you leave. Mordo said, looking at Ned. Although he said so, Modu's face was very solemn. It was obvious that the truth was not what he said. Mordo, you are still as tough-talking as ever. I must beat you up before I leave. No need to discuss, Ned said calmly with a mask on his face. This mask is called the Mask of Pain, and it is also a magic weapon. After wearing it, it can not only make Ned's magic more effective, but also help him become immune to all mental attacks, including illusions. Believe me, you will regret it. Modu took out the scepter of the Tribunal of Life and held it in his hand. Ned smiled slightly when he saw this, and then directly summoned the sacred sword of Emperor Weixin to slash at Mordo. Mordo saw Ned slashing at him with the flaming sword, and quickly blocked the blow with the scepter of the Court of Life. With a sound of bang, the sacred sword of Emperor Weixin in Ned's hand collided with Mordo's scepter of the Tribunal of Life, and they were evenly matched. Seeing this, Ned turned the blade and slashed at Mordo's waist, using the waist cut move. Faced with this move, Mordo stepped on the ground with his photo's boots, then rose into the air and landed behind Ned. Then he waved the life court scepter and hit him on the back. Ned felt the sharp wind coming from behind him, and a confident smile appeared on his face. Sure enough, before Mordo's attack hit Ned, the magic floating cloak on Ned's back automatically broke away from Ned and directly wrapped around Mordo's scepter of the Tribunal of Life. Upon seeing this, Mordo quickly reached out to grab the cloak, but Thanos had to pull the cloak several times to pull it off. How could Mordo pull it off easily? Mordo tugged on the cloak twice, but not only did he not pull the cloak off the scepter of the Tribunal of Life, the weapon was also snatched away from his hands by the cloak. Ned had already dispersed the sacred sword of Emperor Weixin in his hand when Mordo and the magic floating cloak were fighting for the scepter of the living tribunal, and conjured a magic whip. At this moment, when he saw that Modu had his weapon snatched away by the cloak, before he had time to use magic, he immediately threw out the magic whip and wrapped it around Modu's ankle. He pulled Modu hard and tripped him down. Then he jumped up and sat directly on Mordo's waist. Ow! How could Mordo be able to bear the heavy sitting of Ned's 300-kilogram body? Mordo immediately called out the sound of killing a pig. Ned smiled slightly when he saw this, took off his mask and said, Mordo, a great writer in the East once said, if someone attacks your waist, you will be killed 100 times 1,000 times. Fight back twice as hard. You must have a deep understanding of it now, right? I give up. I give up. Shet. Get up. Mordo didn't even care about what Ned was saying at this time. He just felt that his waist was about to break, and he quickly shouted for Ned to get up. After listening to Mordo's words, Ned stood up and said, Okay, Mordo, thank you for your teachings these past few months. I'm going to start my apprenticeship. After Ned finished speaking, he bent down to help Mordo up and walked towards his cabin. He then packed up his things and left. Oh, Ned. Mordo covered his waist and looked at Ned's back and shouted, What is the name of the great writer you are talking about? How can he use such vulgar language? Upon hearing this, Ned turned around and said with a smile, Mr. Lu Xuan. After saying that, he stopped staying and continued to leave. After hearing Ned's words, Mordo's eyes flashed and he muttered, Mr. Lu Xuan. Oh, Ned, happy holiday. You will never imagine what I experienced at the technology exhibition. Ned received a call from Peter as soon as he got home, and Peter's excited voice came from the phone. Ned listened to Peter's words and replied, Peter, believe me, my holidays are more colorful. Okay, Ned, Stark Industries will have an exhibition in Manhattan tomorrow. Do you want to go? Peter calmed down and said, Okay, see you tomorrow. Bye. Hey, Peter. Ned patted Peter standing at the door and shouted. Snapped. Unexpectedly, Ned's hand was caught by Peter's backhand before he could put it on his shoulder. Ah, Ned. Peter put down his hand awkwardly when he saw Ned and said, Long time no see. Peter. Ned looked at Peter with squinted eyes and said in a serious tone, You seem to be a little different. After hearing Ned's words, Peter smiled dryly and said, Yeah. Maybe I've gained some weight during the holidays. You know, Aunt May always makes me eat more. Ah, Ned, let's go in. Peter suddenly put his arm around Ned's shoulders and said unnaturally. Ned naturally knew what Peter was hiding, and he also had some guesses, but he still said, Okay, let's go in. Boom. As soon as Ned agreed, before he even raised his feet, there was a sudden loud noise not far away, and Peter turned his head instantly and looked there with sharp eyes. I saw a blue light rising from the top of a building not far away, shooting straight into the sky, and then slowly opening a space wormhole in the sky. If it were normal, Peter would definitely think that this was some new technology from Tony Stark, and then discuss it with Ned with a look of admiration. But at this moment, the hairs all over his body stood on end, like exploding hairs, and the spider sense was sending him dangerous messages frantically, making it impossible for him to relax at all. Peter, tell me, is it 2010 now? Just as Peter was staring nervously at the space door in the sky, he heard Ned on the side ask him. Peter said without looking back, Of course it's the year 2012, Ned, you should hide for a while, something is wrong. At this time, Ned no longer cared to listen to what Peter had to say, because he had been deeply shocked by what Peter had just said. He went to Karma-Taj a few days after traveling through time, and didn't pay attention to the timeline at all. But based on the fact that the Ancient One is not dead and Peter has grown up, I think it should be before Doctor Strange, but not far from Captain America 3. After all, Ned vaguely remembers that Peter was only 16 when he participated in the Avengers Civil War. But Ned never imagined that it was only the year 2012. Looking at Peter Parker in front of him, Ned couldn't care less about the timeline at this time. Just because an Iron Man with a fiery red color and gold as a supplement in the sky in the distance rushed towards the building with the name, Stark, written on it. It was obvious that the war was not far away. Okay. Ned's face turned serious, and he slashed at the back of Peter's neck with his knife. Shish. However, before Ned's hand knife could hit Peter, he jumped to the wall on one side and squatted on it parallel to the ground. Then he looked at Ned in disbelief and said, Oh. Ned, why did you attack me? Peter. Ned had guessed when Peter grabbed his hand that Peter Parker should have obtained the spider ability at this time. When he saw it, it turned out to be the case, so he hurriedly said, There is no time to say more, please come back quickly. Bring Aunt May to my home, and then protect Aunt May and Grandma, aliens are going to invade the Earth. After speaking, Ned took a posture, with his left hand in front and his right hand slowly waving behind him. Then a space door slowly opened, and the other side led to Peter's bedroom. Cool. When Peter saw that Ned could open a space door with his bare hands, he immediately forgot about Ned's previous attack on him. He was about to exclaim a few times when Ned kicked him into the space door. Oh, Ned. Peter only had time to utter an exclamation before disappearing. After sending Peter Parker away, the safety of his grandmother was also guaranteed to a certain extent. Ned had no worries anymore. He took off the backpack he was carrying and opened the zipper. He saw a red cloak flying out from it and rushing toward Ned. Virtue. Ned grabbed the cloak with his right hand and swung it behind him. The cloak was placed on his back, and the clothes on his body had changed into Taj's mage uniform. It's specifically like what Doctor Strange did when Hulk smashed into the New York Temple at the beginning of Avengers 3. Then Ned took out the mask of pain, and put it on his face, threw away his backpack and flew into the air, flying towards Stark Tower. I have an army. At this time, Tony Stark was still stalling for time, waiting for Jarvis to activate the Mark 7. Loki said arrogantly. We have Hulk. After hearing what Loki said, although Tony Stark was very worried, he still said very confidently on the surface. Didn't that guy get lost? Loki replied, still smiling as if he had everything under control. You've missed the point. There will be no throne. You can't be the king. Maybe you have an army coming, maybe we can't resist it, but we will blame it all on you. Because if we can't protect the Earth, then you just wait for us to take revenge. As he spoke, Tony Stark took a sip of wine calmly. After listening to Tony Stark's words, Loki's face darkened, and he slowly walked towards Stark, saying as he walked, if they are busy dealing with you, how can they have time to come to me? While speaking, Loki raised the spiritual scepter in his hand and pointed it at Stark's chest. Stark's heart tightened after hearing Loki's words. He wanted to dodge but was not wearing armor. He couldn't keep up with Loki's speed. Before he could react, Loki's scepter had already touched his chest. There was a ding sound, but Tony didn't respond. Loki smiled when he saw this, and then clicked again, ding. Tony still had no reaction. Seeing this, Loki couldn't help but said doubtfully, it was okay before. Stark saw that Loki's scepter didn't work on him. Although he was confused about the reason, he still breathed a sigh of relief. Then he was about to make a few jokes when he heard a voice coming from the window. Performance disorders are common. 1 in 5 men. Hearing this sudden sound, Loki and Tony Stark were both startled. They both turned and looked out the window. They saw a fat man outside the window, estimated to be 300 kilograms, floating in the air in a red cloak with a face on his face. Wearing a ghostly mask. Yeah, what this fat friend said is right, but don't feel inferior. After all, you have such a big brother, maybe you will be very comfortable with him on top. Although Tony Stark didn't know whether the person coming was friend or foe, and the pain mask on Ned's face made him shudder, it still didn't stop him from making fun of him. In just a few words, Loki was stimulated. Veins popped out on his forehead, and he wanted to stab this poisonous guy to death. But Ned floating outside the window put a lot of pressure on Loki. For a moment, he didn't dare to distract Tony Stark. Who are you? Although he couldn't see the depth of Ned, as the #1 magician in the 9 realms and the Prince of Asgard, Loki's pride made him unwilling to show any timidity. He raised his eyebrows and looked at Ned's decoration and said, does Midgard also have its own mages? Looking at Loki who looked like he wanted to be beaten, Ned couldn't help but fly towards him, but as soon as he flew a little bit, he seemed to think of something, and asked Tony Stark next to Loki, hey, that guy with a weak look on his face. Guy, you don't need me to pay for your glass, right? After finishing speaking, he ignored Tony Stark who looked in disbelief. He waved his hands to summon 2 magic shields and held them in his hands. He pushed them forward and smashed the shields in front of him that were supposed to be protected by Stark. The glass he smashed with his head. As soon as Ned flew into the Stark Tower, a sound came out from inside almost at the same time. Then a fiery red iron lump rushed out from inside, directly knocking Loki away who was standing next to Tony Stark, and then automatically dressed on Stark. Hey, that fat guy, does your neighbor's kid know that you stole his Halloween toys? Tony Stark suddenly gained confidence after putting on the steel armor and said provocatively to Ned. Ned was too lazy to pay attention to the loveless Tony Stark, and turned around and headed straight for Loki, only to see him turn over and jump off the building, quickly leaving on a Chitauri aircraft. Seeing this, Ned had no choice but to give up. After all, although the magic floating cloak could fly, its flying speed was still slower than that of the Chitauri aircraft, especially when it was carrying a fat man weighing 300 pounds. When Tony Stark saw Loki escaping and the overwhelming alien soldiers destroying the mountains and fields everywhere, he didn't bother to fight with Ned. He activated the thrusters on his feet and flew out of the building, wearing the Mark 7 suit. He fired all the weapons he carried and frantically cleared out the Chitauri soldiers. Seeing this, Ned was not to be outdone. He flew out of Stark Tower and hung in the air. His hands slowly intertwined in front of him, and then suddenly fell. The moment Ned's hands fell, countless clones separated from Ned's body, met the overwhelming Chitauri soldiers. This move was Kamar-Taj's advanced spell, the form of Icon. At this time, the 3 Americans who arrived belatedly on a Quinjet finally arrived. Stark, we're here. Tell me, what's going on with these big fat guys flying around? On the Quinjet, Natasha looked at Natasha, who was waving a magic shield to clean up the Chitauri soldiers. Duh, asked Stark through the headset. Although she didn't know Ned, it was not difficult to tell from the fact that Ned was also dealing with alien soldiers that he was one of her own, and Stark arrived before them all, so in Natasha's opinion, Stark Grams must know something. Did you go on vacation? Hearing Natasha's voice, Stark first teased, and then replied, how do I know where this big fat man who stole his mother's shawl like the hero of Breaking Point came from? I only know that he beat Broken My Glass. Jarvis, keep this account in mind first, and I will settle the account with Bambi after I have beaten him away. Yes, sir, Jarvis said after hearing what Stark said. Captain America and others automatically ignored the second half of Stark's sentence. Is he also the god of Asgard? Captain America asked after listening to Stark's words. After all, after looking at Ned after Stark's prompting, we did find that Ned was indeed the same as Thor except for his body shape, and both wore strange clothes that were different from the normal clothes on Earth. And looking at the number of clones that cover the sky and even match the number of Chitauri soldiers that have entered the Earth so far, and the ability of each clone to kill a Chitauri soldier in 2 or 3 strokes, it is indeed very likely that it will be another Chitauri soldier. God, from Asgard. No, Loki doesn't know him. Stark replied casually after hearing what Captain America said. Just when Stark was about to say something, a Chitauri beast the size of a SHIELD space carrier slowly flew out from the space wormhole in the sky, shocking Stark. He suppressed the words that had not yet come out of his mouth. Even the many clones that Ned created using the form of Icon chose to avoid the sharp edge temporarily when facing this behemoth and scattered to avoid it. Drink. At this moment, a thunder flashed in the sky, and a strong man with long flowing golden hair descended from the sky. The small hammer in his hand carried the extremely powerful power of thunder and lightning and hit the head of the Chitauri beast heavily, causing it to fall. It was tilted heavily. For details, please refer to Hulk's earth-shattering punch when he appeared. Just when everyone was surprised by the strange power of the visitor, they saw Chitauri soldiers jumping out of the giant beast one after another, clinging to the walls of the surrounding buildings and roaring. And the Chitauri beast, which tilted up a bit and then fell heavily to the ground, also moved its body up and down again and again, still full of energy, making everyone stunned. I remember that hammer has a special characteristic, that is, no one can lift it, right? Stark looked at the Chitauri beast that kept moving on the ground, seemed to have thought of something, and suddenly said, yes, this is written in the file. After Stark's reminder, Hawkeye and Black Widow immediately reacted. Especially Hawkeye, who had experienced the Thor incident. Looking at the Chitauri beast struggling under Mjolnir in front of him, he looked exactly like the fashionable old man who drove a tractor to tow Mjolnir and had his car damaged. Thor originally thought about falling from the sky and hitting a big monster, so that the Tin Woodman, who didn't know the heights of the sky and was particularly annoying when talking, could see the power of God. But looking at the scene in front of him, he didn't know what to say. What? After all, the person who gave Mjolnir the property of not being lifted by others was his father, so there was nothing worth showing off. Don't pick up the hammer. Just when Thor was about to pick up the hammer and hit the Chitauri beast again, a voice suddenly came to his ears, and then he saw a big fat man wearing an evil ghost mask falling from the sky and floating in the air. Oh, shit. This guy is simply fatter than Volstagg. After seeing Ned's figure of more than 300 kilograms, Thor exclaimed in his heart, "Fortunately, the power of thunder and lightning flows in my body, and I will never look like this, otherwise Jane will definitely dump me." Of. Single quote. Just when Thor was thinking wildly, Ned slowly waved his left hand in front of him and his right hand behind him. With a stab sound, a huge portal slowly appeared, and what was connected to the other side was the mirror space. After summoning the portal, Ned pushed it with one hand towards the Chidori beast that was pressed to the ground by Mjolnir. When the portal reached the middle of the Chidori beast, he turned his right hand counterclockwise, and the door closed instantly, cutting the Chidori beast in half. Shet. Seeing Ned's actions, Stark and Thor cursed each other, especially Thor, who picked up his own Mjolnir with a stunned look on his face. In his opinion, Ned was probably a mage like Loki. He had no fighting ability at all and could only stab people in the back. He never expected that he could kill a Chidori behemoth with one move. Okay. Captain America took the lead and said to Ned, "No matter what, we are all comrades in the same trench now. What do we call them?" "Mystic Mage." Ned nodded after listening to Captain America's words. Tony curled his lips after hearing Ned's name. "Okay, congratulations on adding a new member to the Freak Alliance." Do. At this moment, an out-of-place sound of motorcycles suddenly came from the messy battlefield. Everyone looked back and saw a disgraced Dr. Banner finally arriving on a small motorcycle. At the same time, one after another Chidori beasts entered the sky above New York through space wormholes, and one of them headed straight for the Avengers. Upon seeing this, everyone looked at Ned, wanting him to use the move just now, and judging from the flexibility of his portal, even without the suppression of Mjolnir, it was definitely not something that the huge, slow-moving Chidori beast could do. Can be avoided. Team leader. But Dr. Banner obviously didn't understand what everyone meant. Looking at such a big Chidori beast, he just felt that the time had come for him to take action. He calmly got off his motorcycle and walked slowly towards the Chidori beast. "Drive, Banner." Captain America saw Banner's behavior and was about to call him to stop, but heard Banner say, "Let me tell you a secret, I have always been angry." As soon as he finished speaking, the gentle Bruce Banner turned green from head to toe and turned into the Hulk, who was more than 2 meters tall. But although Hulk is called the Hulk, it is only compared to the people on Earth. In front of the Chidori beast, which is comparable in size to the space carrier, Hulk is like an infant. Roar. Just when everyone was worried about him, Hulk roared and then punched the Chidori beast on the head, and then the Chidori beast raised its head high. Different from Thor's previous hammer, this time the Chidori beast did not fall again, but directly reached a level perpendicular to the ground. Then it weakly rolled over the Hulk and smashed towards everyone. He was completely lifeless after being hit by Hulk's punch. Everyone in the Avengers was surprised and ran away. Just when Tony Stark flew forward and planned to blow up the Chidori beast, Ned arrived first, raising his hand and swiping the Chidori beast's huge weapon. The body disappeared. This is exactly the use of mirror space. Okay. A huge green question mark seemed to appear on Hulk's head. Looking at Ned floating in the sky, Hulk roared, "Who? Where did such a big mechanical monster go?" That's probably what Hulk meant. "Mage, what's going on? Where are the alien monsters?" Captain America asked in surprise. Calm down, it's just some tricks," Ned said calmly, resisting the urge to dress B. "Okay." Captain America nodded, and then said seriously, "Everyone, listen up, we must contain them before the portal closes. Barton, you go up to the roof and find out the route of these guys. Stark, hold your position. Anything approaching these 3 streets will force them to retreat or burn to ashes. Thor, the mage, you two have to find a way to block the portal and block them. Thor can summon lightning and burn them all, and the mage can continue to use the circle of fire to deal with those big monsters." Having said this, Captain America paused, and then asked Ned, "Mage, you have the most moves here, is there a way to close the channel?" "No, I only know that it can be done with Loki's scepter, and I have no other way," Ned replied truthfully. "Okay." Captain America nodded, and then said, "If anyone finds Loki, tell the mage his location immediately." After saying this, Captain America looked at Black Widow again and said, "You and me, we have to control the battlefield on the ground." Hulk. Finally, Captain America looked at Hulk. "Smash it hard." Humph. After listening to Captain America's words, Hulk showed a cruel smile, then jumped up and flew to the top of the building, smashing the Chidori everywhere. Oh, Captain America. Are you Captain America? Just when everyone was about to go about their business, a sudden exclamation came from the venue, and then a young man in a red hood was seen flying over with spider silk, and exclaimed to Captain America, U.S. Captain. This is unbelievable. Hey, I'm your fan, Hey, Spider-Man. Just when the excited Peter was about to reveal his identity, Ned stopped him with a sharp shout. You must know that Hydra at this time has not been discovered by Captain America and has been seriously injured. If they now know about superhumans like Peter, it will inevitably cause no more troubles. We all have to say our nicknames. I'm an arcane mage. I'm Spider-Man. Interrupted by Ned, Peter scratched his head in embarrassment, then looked at his two idols, Captain America and Iron Man, and said with some restraint. So, what's going on with this obviously underage pajama baby? Iron Man was the first to ask Ned. I'm not a pajama baby, I'm. After hearing Tony's words, Peter was about to refute, but was interrupted again by Stark. Adults talk, children don't interrupt. Oh, Peter lowered his head and stood up aggrievedly. Obviously Ned isn't that old yet. Single quote. Peter thought in his heart. Seeing Peter's appearance, Ned felt a little helpless and could only say to everyone, you can treat him as a super soldier without any combat experience. Okay. Although Captain America is a little disgusted with children like Peter going to the battlefield, there is an alien invasion at this time, and Peter has special powers that others do not have, so he can't care so much. Listen, kid, you will work with us to control the battlefield on the ground. In addition, if you encounter danger, call for help in time. Yes, Captain. Peter stood at attention excitedly when he saw Captain America personally giving him the order. Wait a minute. Ned interrupted them. Spider-Man, didn't I ask you to go back and protect your aunt and grandma? Why are you here? Oh, Peter said immediately after hearing Ned's words. It was a lady in yellow clothes. She picked up aunt and grandma using the same moves as you, and told me to help you. After listening to Peter's words, Ned guessed that it was the Ancient One who had taken action. Naturally, he had nothing to say and could only nod helplessly. Seeing that everyone was fine, everyone in the Avengers rushed to their respective posts and started fighting. Ned rushed directly to the wormhole high in the sky, and suspended near the wormhole. He took a posture to cast the portal, waving his arms while meditating on the top of the Himalayas that the Ancient One had taken him to. We can't find Loki now. The fighting in the city has caused too much damage. It would be great if we could send all these guys to that desolate place to deal with it. Ned thought in his mind. Stab. Gradually, a portal sparkling with sparks slowly opened, but before Ned could be happy, it collapsed and dissipated with a click. Faced with this abnormal scene, Ned glanced at the cosmic cube on the roof of Stark Tower below. He already understood the reason and had no choice but to give up. At this moment, Ned's intuition, which was derived from the secret magic mage, suddenly noticed that space-time fluctuations occurred a few streets away, and he was suddenly shocked. Could there be creatures from other latitudes coming to Earth at this time? Single quote. Although Ned thought that there wouldn't be any big trouble with Ancient One here, he still couldn't rest assured. There were clones of him everywhere anyway, so it wouldn't hurt if he left for a while, so he flew to a corner and drove to the perceived location. A portal passed through. The time has come for the Avengers to assemble. A few blocks away, after a burst of quantum fluctuations, 4 humanoid creatures in white uniforms appeared instantly. After they took off their white uniforms, they saw Iron Man and Captain America. We will operate separately, with 2 rough stones in the upper city and 1 in the lower city. We will keep a low profile and pay attention to the time. Captain America said as he walked. At this moment, a roar suddenly came from behind him. Roar. Hearing the roar, Captain America, Iron Man and others looked behind them nervously in a vigilant posture. But he saw a big green man falling from the sky, smashing several Chitauri soldiers into pieces with one palm, and then ravage the cars on the roadside before flying away, without even looking at Captain America and others. Dr. Banner in the team couldn't help but cover his face in embarrassment when he saw Hulk being so violent. But Captain America seemed to have thought of something. He looked at Banner seriously and said, Dr. Banner, why don't you smash things and see how it feels? After hearing what Captain America said, Banner reluctantly put down the big green hand that was covering his face, tore his shirt to pieces as he walked forward, and said, I don't think it's necessary, but it doesn't matter. After Banner finished speaking, he let out a low roar and looked around for targets that he could smash at will. Stab. At this moment, a burst of golden sparks suddenly appeared next to the Avengers from the future, and as the sparks rotated, a portal slowly opened. Neither Captain America nor Ant-Man had ever seen this method before, and they thought it was their group's time travel that caused some trouble, and they immediately prepared for battle vigilantly. Only Tony Stark and Dr. Banner, who had seen the world, patted Captain America's shoulder nonchalantly and said, "Old people don't need to be so nervous. This is probably the magician who came to us." After Stark finished speaking, a fat man wearing a cloak and an evil ghost mask walked out of the portal. "Ah, is this the Doctor Strange you are talking about? I thought he should be slimmer." Ant-Man Scott looked at Ned, who was not lighter than the Thor of their world, and felt a little confused. He said softly to Stark beside him in disbelief. Stark was also startled by Ned's figure at this time, and after listening to Scott's words, he casually replied, "Who knows, maybe he also likes beer and French fries at this time." While talking, Tony also took the initiative to meet Ned and said, "Hey, juggler, is this the one time you said we won out of more than 14 million? Ned already knew their identities when he saw the group of people in front of him. At this time, he heard Stark's words and replied, "Stark, maybe I am not the person you know. In addition, you all seem to have some problems. It's different." Huh. Tony Stark was obviously startled when he heard Ned's voice, and said in surprise, "Aren't you Strange? If you're looking for Strange, you're probably 5 years early. Now he's doing surgery more than 20 blocks away." Ned replied, plagiarizing what the Ancient One should have told Banner. Well, although Stark knew that he was wrong, he didn't care and said, "By the way, why didn't you bring that retro necklace? You know we are here this time for the gems inlaid in that necklace." In Stark's understanding, arcane mages like Strange can see the future, so he stated his purpose of coming here without reservation. Ned naturally knew what the necklace in Stark's mouth was referring to, and replied, "The Eye of Agamotto has always been kept by the Supreme Mage. I have no right to lend it to you." "Wow, isn't it? You are not the Supreme Mage. You must know that that annoying guy Strange was already the Supreme Mage in our time. Will you be surpassed by the younger generation?" Stark raised his eyebrows. He wanted to say more, but was interrupted by Captain America. "This mage friend, although you are not the Supreme Mage, we still hope that you can help us persuade the Supreme Mage to lend us the Time Stone. In the future." "I know." Before Captain America could finish his words, he was interrupted by Ned. "Not only do I know, the Supreme Mage also knows, but this matter can only be handled by you." "It's all right." Captain America nodded helplessly and asked Banner to go to the New York Temple as originally planned. After Banner left, Ned said, "I don't know what changes will be caused by interfering with what should have happened now, but what I still want to say is, if something goes wrong with your plan, don't be stingy with the use of gems. Captain Marvel Carol can fully withstand the backlash caused by the gem." Also, Ned stared at Tony Stark from the future through the devil's mask and said, "Don't be smart and try to guess the tips from the mage." After speaking, without waiting for Captain America and Tony to say anything else, Ned turned around and left through the portal again, and joined the battlefield. Captain America and Stark looked at each other thoughtfully after hearing Ned's warning. "Hey, what did he mean by that? What should we do next?" Scott asked when he saw that the two leaders suddenly stopped talking. "Act as planned." Captain America said a few words lightly, then looked at Stark and nodded to each other. On the battlefield, Captain America in the current timeline saw that although he and others were doing their best to resist the Chitauri soldiers, ordinary people were still suffering heavy casualties. So he flew up and jumped directly onto the position established by the New York police car, and said to the New York Police's top commander on the scene, "Send people to the surrounding buildings. People in the buildings will be under fire when they escape. If it spreads, take them to the basement or the subway. Don't let them come to the street, and block off this place to 39th Street. The police commander saw that this guy who appeared out of nowhere and cosplayed as Captain America was actually giving orders to him. He looked at the men in front of him and then looked at Captain America as if he was mentally retarded and said, "Why should I listen to your orders?" At this moment, a missile landed not far from them, and several Chitauri soldiers rushed towards the police position. Upon seeing this, Captain America tightened his shield in his hand and rushed forward, finishing off all the Chitauri soldiers in 3 strokes. Quote. After a brief silence, The New York police officer turned around decisively, picked up the walkie-talkie, and said as he walked, "Send people to the surrounding buildings, take people underground, don't come to the street, and blockade this place to 39th Street." Quote. On the other side, Peter Parker, wearing a hooded suit, screamed while jumping around on the street, and from time to time he sent out spider webs to save people still on the street or to kill one or two Chidori soldiers. Although Peter showed good fighting ability, his completely unstructured and uncoordinated fighting style also gave his partner Black Widow some headaches. "Hey, Spider-Boy, we should fight as a team. Don't fly too far. Also, be careful not to wander in front of me, lest I worry about whether my bullets will hit you." "Oh, love sorry." Peter heard Black Widow's reminder and hurriedly swung back with the spider silk, stood next to Black Widow and said, "Soldier. Spider-Man, obey the order." The habits formed during her years as an agent allowed Black Widow to keenly capture the information conveyed in Peter's words. But even so, she has no idea of delving deeper now that the enemy is facing her. Especially after experiencing the incident of Hawkeye being brainwashed, she no longer wants to know the truth of many things. "Hey, guys." At this time, Hawkeye on the tall building suddenly said through the headset, "I saw Loki." After the words fell, Hawkeye pointed his bow and arrow directly at Loki. You must know that as an agent rather than a soldier, one of his purposes in participating in this war is to shoot the arrow into Loki's eyes. Call out. Boom. Although Hawkeye's arrows were accurate and fast, Loki, as the greatest mage in the 9 realms, the princess of Asgard, and the orthodox king of Jotunheim, could not succeed in a sneak attack with his mere mortal skills. Just when the sharp arrow was about to hit Loki's handsome face with the sound of breaking through the sky, Loki just raised his hand and grabbed Hawkeye's arrow in his hand. The arrow was still in Loki's hand. It shakes and makes a clanging sound, which shows its strength. While holding the arrow in his hand, Loki glanced sideways at Hawkeye, with a sarcastic and evil smile on his face. However, when Hawkeye saw his appearance, a smile appeared on his lips, and then he said to Ned in the headset, "Mage, go, Loki is in Stark Tower." Drip drip drip. Okay. Boom. Ow. Just as Hawkeye was speaking, the arrowhead held by Loki suddenly made a beeping sound, causing Loki to look at it curiously. However, an explosion occurred in the next moment. The power of the special arrow explosion was enough to successfully break through the defense even for a god like Loki, and he let out a painful scream. Boom. After the explosion, Loki was blown directly into the Stark Tower. He had just threatened Tony Stark's position. After landing, Loki turned over and stood up, which shows how powerful his body is. Roar. Whoa. Boom. However, Loki had just stood firm when a big green man flew toward him outside the window with a roar. He smashed the entire glass and knocked him away with a punch. He hit the wall behind him hard, knocking the wall straight. They all made a dent. Hulk didn't give up even after beating Loki away. He took a step forward and ran towards Loki, intending to ravage Loki again. Enough. Then Loki had enough of being defeated one after another by the mortals of the earth, so he stood up and let out a roar. This roar came so suddenly that it startled Hulk. He slowed down and stopped in place, looking at Loki in surprise, wondering what had happened to him. "Who do you think you are? I'm a god, you idiot, you ants can't even think of bullying you." Bang, 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 bang. Hulk originally thought that Loki was going to use some big move, but it turned out to be such a series of nonsense. When he was even more angry, he grabbed Loki's legs and lifted him into his hands. He continued to beat him to the ground back and forth until he finally used it. When he got angry, he threw him heavily to the ground. Then Hulk glanced at Loki disdainfully as he walked out and said, "You are a weak god." Loki was left lying on the ground looking at the ceiling and doubting life. However, just as Hulk left, a portal with sparks opened with a stab, and then Ned, wearing a mask, walked out of it and headed straight for Loki. The sound of Ned's arrival also alarmed Loki, who was lying on the ground. Looking at Ned walking towards him quickly, perhaps because he had just been knocked out of the shadow by the Hulk, Loki not only had no intention of resisting, but was actually a little panicked. He forced himself to sit up from the ground and kept glaring at the ground with his legs as he stepped back. While retreating, he said, "Shet. What are you going to do to me? Do you think you are some kind of great mage? Don't even think about it, you second-rate amateur." Ouch. Ned, who had watched Thor 3, knew what Loki wanted to say after listening to the beginning, so he immediately took off with a crisp spin, and then sat down heavily on Loki, which directly caused Loki to let out a killing sound. Pig-like wails of pain. Then Ned stood up as if nothing happened, patted his butt, picked up the mind scepter that fell aside, and flew out. Loki, on the other hand, was lying on the ground with his eyes blank, his mouth moving slightly, as if he was mumbling something. With Ned's extraordinary ear, he could faintly hear the words, "Mom. Mom," intermittently. At the same time, standing at the terminus of Asgard's Rainbow Bridge, Heimdall, the patron saint who can see into the 9 realms, twitched slightly at the corners of his eyes, and then returned to his usual calm expression, standing upright with a big sword. It's just that the fear in his heart towards the group of arcane mages on Earth, headed by the powerful Supreme Mage Ancient One, is a little more heightened. At this time, on the battlefield in New York, everyone in the Avengers was still fighting hard. However, due to the addition of Ned and his cheating clone, everyone was not as exhausted as before, except for Hawkeye's arrows. Except for the ones that are still used up, everyone else still has some energy left. For example, Iron Man is leisurely walking among high-rise buildings at this time, constantly using his laser weapon to clear away the soldiers. Since the Chitauri behemoths were easily dealt with by Ned using the portal, Stark did not spend a lot of energy trying to penetrate the Chitauri behemoths' armor this time. He no longer learned how to pierce the chest of the Chitauri beast like Jonah did before, so the remaining energy was still considerable, enough to support it from wandering around the battlefield. Ah oops. As soon as Stark flew over a building, he saw the underage newcomer Pajama Baby shivering surrounded by a group of Chitauri soldiers, so he habitually let out an exclamation and fell down, falling to the ground. I forgot to remind you loudly. Baby in pajamas, get down. When Stark reminded him loudly, Peter's spider sense also issued a warning in time, so he hurriedly crawled to the ground without thinking. I saw a small device suddenly appear on the hands of Iron Man's suit, and then the suit quickly spun in a circle, and a red laser was emitted from the hand device, instantly cutting the surrounding Chitauri soldiers in half. Okay, the danger is over. Stark pulled Peter up and asked, "Where is your guardian? How could he be so unreliable and put you in danger?" Guardian. Oh, you are mistaken, Mr. Stark. Nye, the arcane mage is my good friend, not the guardian. Peter was stunned when he heard Tony's question, and then hurriedly explained, "And I'm not actually afraid of them, it's just that I ran out of spider silk." Just as Tony Stark was about to speak, Nick Fury's voice suddenly came from the headset. "Stark. Do you hear that? There is a nuclear bomb flying towards you, and it will explode in 3 minutes. Shet." When Tony Stark heard Nick Fury's words, he cursed and jumped into the sky. Before leaving, he didn't forget to tell Peter, children should follow adults honestly and not run around like this. "Mr. Stark, I'm not a child," Peter shouted to Stark's departing tail flame, then looked around, and ran to Captain America obediently to wait for instructions. After all, Peter himself knew his own weight. Without a spider thread, he was really in danger on this battlefield. It was better to follow the captain honestly and obey the captain's orders. In this way, you can not only play your best role, but also improve your safety factor. Here, the people in a building that Captain America had just rescued were blown out by Chitauri soldiers. Another group of Chitauri soldiers slowly surrounded them. When they saw Peter coming from the sky, Captain America couldn't help but pat him. 3 grams of oil, kid. I'm not a child, Captain. Peter replied after listening to Captain America's words, then looked at the Chitauri soldiers surrounding him, assumed a posture ready for battle, and asked in a solemn tone, "Also, can the 2 of us deal with them? The spider silk has been used up." Captain America smiled softly after hearing Peter's words, tightened the shield in his hand, and just about to say the words that accompanied him, he saw a bolt of lightning falling from the sky and directly split the nearest Chitauri soldier into pieces. Then Thor also landed heavily beside them, looked at the surrounding Chitauri soldiers with disdain and said, "You are not the only 2. Can we play another round?" Thor looked at Captain America and said. After hearing what Thor said, Captain America asked nonchalantly, "What? Are you sleepy?" The 2 looked at each other and smiled, then each held their weapons and looked at the Chitauri soldiers opposite. "Hey, everyone, I've got Loki's scepter and can close the portal." Ned held Loki's scepter and stood in front of the instrument used to open the space wormhole, looking at the cosmic cube inside and speaking into the headset. The reason why he did not directly close the space wormhole was because he was worried that the US government would launch a nuclear bomb again as before. Although the current war situation is much better than before because of Ned's participation, no one is sure what those crazy politicians are thinking. Turn it off now. Sure enough, just as Captain America finished speaking, Stark's voice came out. No, wait a minute. Stark, there are more and more enemies. Captain America thought that Stark was up to something else, so he quickly said. However, Tony said something that stunned everyone except Ned. I have a nuclear bomb here. I probably know where to send him. Nuclear bomb. Where did the nuclear bomb come from? Thor, God of Thunder, may not understand the meaning of this, but Black Widow and others know it all too well, and they can't help but feel even more frustrated. Stark, you may never come back. Captain America now understood Tony's thoughts and couldn't help but worry. But Tony Stark no longer cared about talking to him. Use all your energy to turn, Jarvis. Sir, do you want to contact Miss Pepper? Unexpectedly, Jarvis said this as if he had the ability to think independently. When Tony heard this, he was slightly silent at first, and then replied, get in touch. But at this time, Pepper on the plane was nervously staring at the details of the New York war broadcast on the TV screen, and did not pay attention to Tony's call on his mobile phone. At this moment, all the SHIELD agents on the battlefield and on the space carrier outside the battlefield, including Nick Fury, were paying attention to the nuclear bomb carried on Tony Stark's back. I saw Tony Stark successfully making a dangerous turn, brushing against the wall of the Stark Tower, soaring into the sky, and finally rushed directly into the space wormhole. Yeah, all the agents on the space carrier cheered together after seeing this scene through the video. Even Nick Fury breathed a sigh of relief, but no one cared about the playboy and superhero who rushed out of outer space. I wonder if I can return. Tony Stark in the universe is about to fall into a coma due to lack of oxygen, but he is still staring at the picture on the screen calling Pepper Potts. It wasn't until he heard the message that the call failed that he finally loosened his hands weakly and allowed the nuclear bomb to fly towards the alien fleet. Tony Stark himself closed his eyes and fell weakly downwards. Shut him. After waiting for a while, but Tony Stark had not returned yet, Captain America said to Ned through the headset. However, Ned did not reply to Captain America's words. He just looked up at the wormhole entrance high in the sky. Just because in the original movie, although Tony Stark successfully fell to the earth the moment the wormhole closed. But at this time, due to Ned's participation, some butterfly effect may not occur, so Ned naturally did not dare to close the wormhole because he was afraid that he would kill Iron Man. Mage. The power of the nuclear bomb explosion will soon spread to the Earth through the space wormhole. Seeing that Ned didn't respond or close the wormhole, Captain America naturally knew that he was waiting for Stark to come back. As Stark's uncle, Steve Rogers is naturally very worried about Stark, but the situation at hand is not the time to take into account personal relationships. If the wormhole is not closed in time, then. While talking, a fiery red figure staggered down from the space wormhole. Everyone was relieved to see this, and Ned also directly stabbed the cosmic cube with the Mind Scepter. The space wormhole was successfully closed, but Stark still fell straight towards the ground. Seeing this, Thor standing on the ground couldn't help but change his face. He quickly rotated the Thor's hammer in his hand and said, he didn't slow down. Roar. At this moment, a roar sounded in the sky, and a green figure flashed past, hugging Iron Man directly in his arms, decelerating on the wall of the building nearby, and then landed heavily on the ground with himself as his back, and Tony Stark in his arms was not damaged at all. After Hulk landed, he threw Iron Man aside, and Thor, Captain America and others also arrived quickly. Thor took off Iron Man's mask, and then Captain America lay on it to feel his breathing, but in the end his face turned dark. Roar. Just when everyone was disheartened, Hulk was also extremely depressed and suddenly roared towards the sky. Wow. Wow. What's the situation? What happened? Please, tell me no one kissed me just now. Tony was so frightened by Hulk's roar that he woke up completely. Looking at Captain America and others who were surrounding him with worried expressions, he teased with fear. Seeing that Tony still had the energy to tease them, Captain America breathed a sigh of relief and said with relief, we won. Well, good job, guys. Hey, any of you want some kebab? There's one 2 blocks away. I haven't eaten there, but I think it's worth a try. Stark said to everyone as if he was relieved of a heavy burden after hearing Captain America's words. Thor also smiled after hearing Tony's words, but then he raised his head and glanced at the roof of Stark Tower and said, "We haven't finished our business yet." As soon as these words came out, Iron Man and others naturally understood what he was talking about, and they all became serious. "Then we will go later. Loki here has just recovered from Hulk's beating and Ned's heavy blow, and is struggling to get up from the ground." Suddenly, as if he sensed something, Loki slowly turned his head and saw everyone in the Avengers standing behind him, looking at him expressionlessly, especially Hawkeye, who was bending his bow and readying an arrow, as if he was going to kill him at the slightest disagreement. Just shoot him through the eyes. Although he felt that with Thor, a big enemy, he would not suffer any inhuman abuse, Loki was still shocked when he suddenly saw such a scene. After swallowing, Loki forced a smile and said, "If you don't mind, I'd like to drink that glass of wine first." "Okay, let him get up. We will have more opportunities to be cool in the future." After posing for a while and letting Jarvis take photos and records, Tony said to the others, "Remember to clean up for me." Quote. Wow! Even before Tony could finish his words, he was suddenly interrupted by Ned's exclamation. "Hey, you fat juggler. I haven't even settled the matter with you for breaking my glass." Of course Tony Stark would not be happy when someone interrupted him. He pointed at Ned with a stinking look on his face and said, "No, no, no, I did it to save you." Ned waved his hand casually and replied after listening to Stark's words. Then he said to Captain America, "Hey, Captain, did you accidentally bump into me just now?" Captain America didn't expect that just an accidental touch would cause Ned to have such a big reaction. Just as he was about to apologize, Ned said, "To be honest, Captain, the butt-lifting effect of your uniform is really not that good." Ned finished speaking. Others had not yet realized what he meant by this, but they suddenly heard Jarvis say, "Mr. Mystic Mage is right, but I think it is very good. You are the classic American butt up, Mr. Rogers." Quote. Quote. Ahahaha. After a brief silence, Tony Stark was the first to burst into laughter. "Hey, Jarvis, man, you are indeed my most caring partner. And you, the fat juggler. Since you have provided me with laughter for a year, I will no longer pursue the glass matter." After hearing what Jarvis said, Captain America still didn't understand the reason for Ned's exclamation. His head was immediately filled with black lines, and when he heard Tony's undisguised laughter, he couldn't help but say, "Tony." PFF'd. As a result, just as he said Tony's name, he heard a laugh coming from beside him. When he turned around, he saw the Spider-Boy, wearing a hooded coat with his hands firmly covering his mouth. The same was true for Black Widow and Hawkeye. A suppressed smile on his face. Seeing Captain America, Black Widow pretended to be calm and said, "Don't worry, Captain, we are all professionally trained and generally don't laugh." PFF'd. Captain America heard the sound and looked towards Hawkeye. "Unless you can't help it," Hawkeye said with a blush on his face. Seeing this, Captain America shrugged helplessly, turned around and walked towards the elevator. As he walked, he said, "There's nothing you can do about it, I'll go direct the search and rescue." "Then who should give this scepter?" Black Widow waved Loki's scepter in her hand to signal to everyone. At the same time, she turned to look at Thor. In her opinion, since the scepter belonged to Loki, Thor might want to recover it and take it back to Asgard. Seeing Black Widow looking at him, Thor raised the suitcase in his hand and said, "Because Asgard needs the Cosmic Cube to repair the Rainbow Bridge, I want to take the Cosmic Cube away. As for this scepter, you should take it with me. Just deal with the trophies." The implication is that if Asgard's Rainbow Bridge had not been destroyed, he, Thor, would not even look down on the cube. Everyone in the Avengers was not surprised when they heard this. After all, after such a long time, they had already adapted to Thor's character. When the others were about to speak, Ned spoke first. "Give it to me, I can use it better." Ned had a plan when he spoke at this time. Although Kamar-Taj's magic is powerful, it may not be of much use when facing Thanos. Please refer to Strange for the specific situation. Ji Yuyi said that although her abilities were extraordinary and all she relied on was Kamar-Taj's magic, they were the result of hundreds of years of practicing magic day after day. Although Ned is extremely talented, he still has a long way to go before he can reach the level of the Ancient One. But for Ned at this time, the worst thing is time. If he doesn't reach a certain level of cultivation before Thanos, then he can really only bet on the 1 in 14 million chance. So Ned planned to find another way to use the power of the infinite stones to compete with Thanos. As the saying goes, only magic can defeat magic. In the same way, only gems can fight against gems. As long as Ned also holds several infinity stones and can use them skillfully, there is no need to fear Thanos anymore. Therefore, when Ned was at Karmatage, in addition to studying normal magic, he also read through all the magic that can use infinite gems. The ancient mage should know Ned's thoughts and did not propose corrections. Instead, he allowed he did it as he pleased, which further strengthened Ned's determination to use the gems against the gems. And if Asgard had not needed the Cosmic Cube to repair the Rainbow Bridge, Ned would have even wanted to take the Cosmic Cube as well. Well, after the big battle just now, everyone has formed a preliminary friendship and trusts each other. In addition, Ned's ability is indeed more suitable for keeping this obviously magical scepter, so after Ned proposed that he should keep the scepter, Black Widow had no other objections, and she responded by handing over the scepter. Hand it to him. Other Avengers members present also felt that this was appropriate. After all, if this penetrating scepter was given to them, they would probably have a headache on how to deal with it, and it would be difficult to rest assured if it was kept by others. Their comrades are the most reliable. Just when Ned was about to take the scepter, the elevator door suddenly opened with a beep, and several S.H.I.E.L.D. agents walked out of it. When those agents saw that Ned was about to get the scepter, they immediately hurried towards the door. As he ran over, one of the bald agents shouted loudly, "Put it down. That doesn't belong to you." Hey, after all, everyone in the Avengers has experienced a war with Ned, and naturally they will not tolerate these guys who look like S.H.I.E.L.D. agents bullying the few and robbing them of their trophies. Among them, Tony Stark, a lawless guy who didn't have a good impression of S.H.I.E.L.D., stood directly in front of Ned. The palm cannon on the palm of the hand glowed slightly, and it pointed at the leader Sitwell and said, "Hey, Four Eyes Head, can you try moving it again?" Click, click. As soon as Stark finished speaking, a team of S.H.I.E.L.D. agents headed by Crossbones Rumlow loaded their bullets, pointing their rifles at Stark's head, which was no longer protected by his armor. What do you mean? It was only now that the very nervous Thor finally reacted. After a loud shout, he flew up and landed next to Tony Stark. The thunder in his hand flashed and he stared at the S.H.I.E.L.D. agent opposite. He originally thought it was one of his own. Stark, on the other hand, looked extremely gloomy after raising his gun from the opposite side, but the light from the palm cannon in his hand was a bit heavier. Faced with this sudden tense situation, Black Widow and Hawkeye just looked at each other and stood behind Ned. With Stark and Thor as cover, one raised his guns and the other bent his bow and nocked an arrow. Hawkeye kept have the habit of recycling arrows. The reason why they did not stand with the S.H.I.E.L.D. commandos who also belonged to their own organization was because their hearts were more inclined to Ned. The other is because based on their understanding of their own director Nick Fury, he will definitely not break up with the Avengers. The situation in front of them must be a problem with the group of guys on the opposite side. Realizing that Natasha and Barton were standing behind him instead of returning to the organization, Stark's expression softened a bit, but it was still very gloomy. Looking at the S.H.I.E.L.D. commandos opposite, the light from the palm cannon became brighter and brighter. It is possible to take the lead at any time. Click, click. Aha. Stark and others only heard a few sounds like breaking glass, and then the S.H.I.E.L.D. commando in front of them disappeared, and they couldn't help but express doubts. Only Loki, who was captured not far away, narrowed his eyes slightly and looked at Ned, who was surrounded by everyone and had received the scepter of the mind in his hand. With his eyesight as the #1 mage in the 9 realms, he could naturally detect some spatial fluctuations, but he could not see through what magic Ned used, nor could he find where those S.H.I.E.L.D. agents had gone. Everyone, wait a moment. Just when everyone was puzzled, Ned suddenly spoke. After leaving these words, his body gradually faded away and disappeared completely within 1 or 2 breaths. Captain America suddenly understood when he saw this and said, "It's the mage." What did he do? Of course, everyone in the Avengers had already realized that Ned must have made those S.H.I.E.L.D. agents go away, but it was not clear what happened, so several people's eyes were focused on Peter. Do you believe me when I say I don't know what's going on? Facing everyone's gaze, Peter said awkwardly. What? In the mirror space, the group of S.H.I.E.L.D. agents had no idea what was happening. They only knew that the floor beneath their feet suddenly disappeared, causing them to fall rapidly one by one. Of course, death is inevitable if you fall from such a height. Rumlow couldn't help shouting to Sitwell, "What kind of technology is this from Stark?" "How would I know? The bald Sidwell's face had been deformed by the airflow, and his glasses had already flown to nowhere. When he heard Rumlow's words, he barely replied at the top of his lungs and fell to the ground together. Boom, boom. Dozens of SHIELD agents fell to the ground one after another, and none of them moved. Their flesh and blood was splashed everywhere, which made Ned's eyelids twitch when he came after him. Thorn. Waving his hands, he opened a portal and dumped all their bodies and flesh on the New York battlefield. Ned turned around and left directly. Anyway, those guys were all field agents of Hydra in the SHIELD office, so they had no psychological burden at all when killing them. Mage. Mage. As soon as Ned appeared, everyone in the Avengers gathered around him, including Natasha and Barton, who were hesitant to speak. All dead. Ned naturally knew what they meant besides concern, so he was the first to speak. Natasha and Barton were not surprised at all when they heard this. They shrugged and stopped talking. They were not merciful people in the first place. Only Tony and Captain America looked a little unnatural, because although they were not interested in the group of agents just now, they still felt that Ned's behavior of killing government personnel at the slightest disagreement was somewhat inappropriate. As for the young spider baby, he had already gone away and doubted his life. While he was talking, Ned accidentally saw a Captain America, also in uniform, waving to him from a place where no one could see. Upon seeing this, Ned said to everyone, "Okay, the matter is not over yet. Captain, it's time for you to direct the search and rescue. And Stark, you all have your own things to be busy with." Well, Tony shrugged, turned and walked towards the elevator. Seeing this, the others also walked towards the elevator. As everyone entered the elevator one after another, only Ned and Hulk were left outside. Hey, you don't still want to come up, do you? Don't even think about it, you two big fat guys, just take the stairs. Seeing that Ned was about to step into the elevator, Stark hurriedly stopped him, mocked. As Stark's words fell, the elevator door slowly closed with a click. Roar. Boom. Feeling deeply insulted, Hulk roared and punched the elevator door hard, making a big hole in the door and startling everyone in the Avengers inside. Hey Hulk. Seeing this, Ned called Hulk, and after he looked over, he opened a portal and said, "Look at me, this is much faster than the elevator." Mage, good. Iron Man, bad. Hulk's expression softened a bit when he saw this, and he walked in while muttering. Ned, on the other hand, formed a clone and followed Hulk when his back was turned to him. His real body ran to a blind corner and only came out after Hulk left to meet up with Captain America from the future. Team leader. Ned greeted Captain America. Mage. Captain America nodded, and then said, "You must also know the true identities of Rumlow and the others, right? Apparently, this captain has been here for a while." Of course. Ned nodded and said, "Otherwise I wouldn't really kill them." Well, Captain America, who had suffered at the hands of the Hydra commandos, naturally had no objections to Ned's approach. He nodded and said, "You also know that I need infinite gems to save our world, so." Captain America gestured towards the psychic scepter held in Ned's hand. "For you." Ned had nothing to say about this and decisively handed the scepter to Cap. "Don't worry, I will definitely return it as soon as possible," Captain America said with a serious face after taking the scepter. Ned couldn't comment on this, but just stared at Cap and emphasized again, "Captain, remember, don't be stingy with the use of gems." Although Captain America doesn't know why Ned warns them again and again, he can also smell the breath of crisis from it. In addition, I learned from Tony that these mages probably have the ability to predict the future, which only adds to the burden on Captain America's heart. Judging from Ned's constant warnings, I'm afraid this time travel is not that simple, and it has even reached the point where gems have to be used. Thinking of this, Captain America didn't want to talk to Ned anymore, and hurriedly went back to discuss with Tony, so he left a goodbye and left in a hurry. Downstairs, Tony Stark, who was about to take Thor to have barbecue, encountered Alexander Pierce's interception. Immediately afterwards, the Ant-Man and Iron Man from the future cooperated to directly obtain the Cosmic Cube, and this time Hulk was also sent down directly by Ned using the space door, without causing any trouble. Everyone in the future carrying the 3 gems gathered together, looked at each other and left through the quantum channel. Future, Avengers base. With an exclamation, everyone returned one after another. "Did you get all the rough stones?" Taking off his quantum costume, Tony Stark looked around at everyone and asked. "We actually succeeded," Rhodes said, holding up the cosmic spirit ball. Everyone smiled when they heard this, feeling that victory was right in front of them. However, Hawkeye's condition was obviously not right. He staggered off the teleportation platform and knelt down on one knee. When Dr. Banner, the most sensitive person, saw this and discovered that Barton, who was supposed to come back with Natasha, actually came back alone, he suddenly had some bad suspicions and said, "Clint, where is Natasha?" After hearing this, the rest of the people saw Clint's eyes filled with tears. They didn't know what had happened, so they all lowered their heads in pain. After some intense research, Tony Stark successfully created a technological infinity gauntlet that could carry the power of 6 gems, but who would snap the fatal finger became a key issue. "I come. What did you say?" "No problem. Stop, wait." The 300-pound fat house Thor took the lead and walked towards the gloves, but the superheroes were obviously not at ease about letting the Thunder God do this fatal snap of his fingers. "Thor, don't worry, we haven't decided who will wear the gloves yet." Captain America stopped Thor and said, "Then should we just sit here and wait? Is there anyone more suitable than me? What do you think is flowing in my body?" Thor, obviously unfazed by Captain America's words, retorted. But as soon as he finished speaking, Rhodes on the side interrupted, "Cheese sauce." Thor was obviously very dissatisfied with Rhodes' interruption. He pointed at Rhodes to show him some respect for the current king of Asgard and the strongest Avenger. Then he said to Captain America, who was standing in front of him, "It's lightning. It's lightning. Lightning. Yeah, lightning." Tony Stark on the side also leaned forward to block Thor, and said, "Listen to me, brother, lightning can't help you, not only because this glove will gather earth-shattering power, but I tell you, your current state is not good at all." Quote. But Thor obviously didn't think so. He grabbed Tony's hand and said in an almost begging tone, "Let me come, let me do something good, do something right." After the enlightenment of his mother Frigga, Thor has basically come out of his previous state, and he deeply feels that what he has done in the past 5 years is really not worthy of his surname, Odinson. So in order to snap his fingers and bring back his comrades and people who were eliminated by Thanos 5 years ago with his own hands, he even put aside his identity as Odinson and spoke to Tony like a beggar. Dude. Facing Thor like this, Tony Stark didn't know what to say, but the body in front of him refused to give in at all. Obviously, he still didn't feel that the Thor in front of him could take on such an important task. Looking at Thor and Iron Man arguing, Captain America suddenly thought of what Ned once said about Carol's ability to perfectly carry the power of gems. He couldn't help but turn to Rocket Raccoon and asked, "How long will it take for Carol to come back to Earth?" "Oh, she probably went to the Universe Beauty and Hair Center to get her hair done, and she won't be back for a few hours." Although Rocket didn't know why Captain America asked about Carol, he still answered truthfully. When Tony heard what Captain America said, he also understood that he wanted to do what the Fat Mage from 2012 said and let Captain Marvel snap his fingers. But what the Fat Mage mentioned was not only the fact that Captain Marvel could carry the power of gems, but on the contrary, this matter seemed to be incidental. Thinking of this, Tony looked around at the superheroes present, and suddenly, he found that a familiar figure seemed to be missing among them. "Where's Smurfette?" Tony asked aloud. Then, without waiting for anyone to react, he hurriedly said to Friday, "Friday, find Smurfette's location immediately. Also, activate the defense procedures." He originally firmly believed that, if you play with time, time will play with you. This, coupled with Ned's repeated reminders before, Tony Stark seemed to be frightened at this time. As soon as he discovered that Nebula was not there, he quickly let Friday find her location while getting ready for battle. When Captain America saw Tony Stark's reaction, he understood that Nebula was probably part of the crisis mentioned by the arcane mage. He hurriedly took the shield in his hand and shouted to the others, "Get ready for battle." "Stark, Captain, what happened?" Others obviously haven't reacted yet. Why are they discussing who will snap their fingers just now, and now they are suddenly ready to fight? "Boss, we found Smurfette." Friday's voice suddenly came out, and at the same time, a holographic projection was projected in front of everyone. In the picture, Nebula was seen walking around all the way. His footsteps were non-stop. His face was extremely calm, as if he was an agent who had experienced hundreds of battles and had been lurking for a long time. The moment everyone present saw this, they understood that there might be something wrong with the Nebula in front of them. Then they thought that she was the daughter of Thanos. Who knows what happened to her when she was traveling in time? Maybe Thanos would jump too soon. Out. Thinking of this, all the superheroes clenched their weapons and prepared to fight. Friday. Analyze, what is her goal? Tony Stark looked at the holographic projection in front of him and said with a gloomy expression. The nebula in this world had drifted with him in the universe for quite some time, and even saved his life during this time. He was already a very trustworthy person, but he never expected that something would go wrong with Nebula at such a critical moment. If it weren't for Ned's prompting that made him more cautious, the consequences would be unimaginable. Boss, her goal is the time machine. As Friday's voice sounded, a road map was projected. I'll catch her. After Tony saw it, without saying a word, the nanosuit directly covered his body, rushed out of the room, and headed towards the nebula. I am coming too. Rocket Raccoon's teammates all died under the snap of Thanos' fingers, and the only person close to him may be Nebula. Now that something is wrong with Nebula, he may even be killed by Iron Man on the spot. Rocket Raccoon cannot just watch from the sidelines. At the very least, he must understand why Nebula rebelled. I'll take you. The storm axe in Thor's hand was built together with Rocket. Seeing that Rocket was going to find Nebula alone, he was naturally worried about his combat effectiveness. Not caring about fighting for the right to use the gloves, he hurriedly followed, holding Rocket Raccoon in his hands, and ran towards the location of the nebula shown in the holographic projection. The remaining people looked at each other and felt that since Thor and Iron Man were gone, Nebula alone would not be able to make a big splash. But after all, they lacked understanding of Nebula, so they all looked at Captain America, who obviously had a special source of intelligence. When Captain America saw others looking at him, he thought for a while and then said, "There is no other way. No matter what, snapping your fingers to save people cannot be delayed." As he spoke, Captain America looked around at the people present and found that the most physically fit person present was Dr. Banner. When Captain America looked at him, Banner also walked towards the glove and said as he walked, "This stone mainly emits gamma rays, as if, this is the meaning of my existence." While speaking, Banner remembered what the powerful female Supreme Mage said to him before, "It depends on you, Bruce, everything depends on you." This strengthened his determination to snap his fingers. Banner picked up the glove under everyone's nervous gaze and put it on his hand. As it got closer to Banner's palm, the glove continued to enlarge, and finally became a suitable size and put it on Banner's hand. What? As soon as Banner put on his gloves, countless streaks of colorful flowing energy instantly appeared on the gloves and surged toward his right arm. The huge energy instantly caused Banner's right arm to emit smoke, and the energy was radiant and continuously eroding Banner's body. As time went by, Banner's arm was gradually roasted into charcoal. What? Along with the cry of pain, Banner raised his right hand high, and finally, bang! Sounded the finger snap that carried everyone's hope. After a crisp metallic sound, Banner suddenly rolled his eyes and lay weakly on the floor, his gloves falling off his arms naturally. Bruce. Upon seeing this, Captain America and others hurriedly moved forward, and the attentive Hawkeye even kicked his gloves aside to avoid any accidents and secondary damage. At the same time, Nebula had arrived at the time machine, took off the bandage on his hand, and was about to insert his hand into the machine. Smurfette. This was what Iron Man saw when he arrived. He instinctively raised his hand to shoot her away with a palm cannon, but thinking about the friendship in the past, he did not fire it, but instead let out a loud roar. Stop. Nebula from another timeline naturally did not react to Iron Man's stop. Without any pause, she inserted her modified fingers into the time machine, and the time machine started instantly. After a burst of quantum fluctuations, a huge spaceship flew out, directly hitting a big hole in the ceiling of the Avengers base, and then suspended high in the sky. Shet. Tony Stark in the steel armor cursed, obviously not expecting Nebula to be able to activate the time machine so quickly. At the same time, I was also a little surprised that I seemed to have been under some inexplicable influence just now, and actually let Nebula control me and just shouted. Stark, what's going on? At this time, Thor and Rocket also arrived. Looking at the big hole above their heads, they felt very bad. At this time, Nebula took off the disguise on her head and looked at the three Starks with murderous eyes. You are not Nebula. At this time Rocket Raccoon suddenly exclaimed, "No, you are the Nebula from before." He has been observing Nebula since he arrived. Based on his understanding of Nebula, she should no longer work for Thanos. Then he saw Nebula take off the disguise on his head, and the murderous aura all over his body instantly reminded Rocket Raccoon of Nebula, who had been against them before. The previous Nebula. Stark reacted instantly after hearing Rocket Raccoon's words, and then no longer hesitated. The chest cluster cannon was activated instantly, and one shot punched a big hole in Nebula's body, killing him. Everyone. After destroying Nebula, Stark said through the headset, "Get ready for battle, the battle is coming." Boom. Boom. As soon as Stark finished speaking, Thanos' spaceship launched a direct fire salvo mode, and a burst of fire directly reduced the Avengers' base to rubble. After a struggle, the three Avengers plus a Rocket Raccoon appeared first, standing together and looking at Thanos, who was sitting not far away. "So, do we have to face him in the end?" Tony Stark murmured, looking at the purple figure that appeared in his nightmares many times. "It's just another swing of the storm axe." Thor lost his previous decadent look when facing Thanos, and said with a stern expression, "Is this the crisis that the mage said we must use the infinite stones to deal with?" Captain America tightened the shield in his hand and said solemnly, "Little fool, you hide, we're about to attack." Tony Stark put on his headgear and said casually to Rocket Raccoon on the side. Rocket Raccoon has been wandering around the universe all year round. He has long heard of Thanos' reputation. In addition, he faced Thanos in person 5 years ago, so he naturally knows how powerful Thanos is. At this time, after hearing Iron Man's seemingly taunting but actually caring words, he took a few steps back very honestly, hid in the ruins and blocked himself with a stone, only sticking out his head to observe the battlefield. Seeing that Rocket Raccoon had taken cover, Thor opened his arms. In an instant, the power of thunder and lightning filled his body. A thunder exploded in the sky, and Mjolnir and Storm Axe flew into his hands, one on the left and the other on the right. At the same time, his clothes have also been changed into armor that belongs exclusively to the God of Thunder. This time let's finish him off once and for all. After the words fell, the three giants of the Avengers slowly walked towards Thanos, who was playing with the dirt there. "You are not willing to accept failure, so what will be the result? You still have to face me. I thought I could prosper by eliminating half of all life and the other half, but you proved to me that that's impossible." Thanos did not panic at all when facing the three giants of the Avengers who were slowly walking towards him. He sat on a rock and spoke slowly. The three Iron Man men kept walking to change positions as he spoke, gradually forming a triangle and surrounding Thanos in the middle. As long as there are people who are still concerned about the past, they will never be able to accept the future and will definitely resist. Thanos did not panic at all when he was surrounded by Iron Man, Thor and Captain America, and continued to deliver his speech. "Yes, we are just so stubborn," Tony Stark replied after listening to Thanos' words. Now that the siege has been formed, Tony, who firmly believes that Kai Zeshang will change, can't wait to try to kill this nightmare of his. "Thank you." Unexpectedly, Thanos said this. "Because now, I know what I have to do, I have to turn this universe into atomic dust." Thanos stood up and said, "Then, use the Infinity Stones you helped me find to create a new universe. The life there has no resentment for loss, only gratitude for what has been given." While talking, the four people on both sides were ready to fight. A grateful universe. A universe riddled with blood debt. Captain America retorted after hearing Thanos' words. "They have no way of knowing, because you won't live until that time." As he spoke, Thanos had a cruel expression on his face. And these words completely ignited the anger of the three Avengers. They heard a loud shout from Thor's mouth, and with the power of lightning flowing all over his body, he swung his storm axe at Thanos. However, 5 years of desolation and 300 pounds of fat on his body made Thor's movements extremely clumsy, and he was easily dodged by Thanos. Iron Man on the side instantly transformed his hand armor into a giant blade when Thor struck out, flying in the air and slashing towards Thanos from top to bottom. Unexpectedly, the supposedly clumsy Earthlings were much faster than Thor. Thanos, who had just avoided Thor's axe, had no time to dodge Iron Man's attack. But although the speed of the steel suit was faster than that of Thor, it was far behind in power. Although Thanos could not dodge, he just raised the Tyrant Butcher knife in his hand to block him. Dwang. Not to be outdone, Captain America threw his vibranium round shield at Thanos, but Thanos just knocked the shield away with a casual blow. Although the shield eventually flew back to Captain America's hands due to Captain America's unreasonable buff, this still does not change the fact that Captain America is the Gua Sha King. Of course, being able to participate in this god-level battle with Thanos as a mere mortal shows the strength of the American team. As soon as Thanos knocked Captain America away, Thor came closer again. Although Thor was much slower due to obesity, the power contained in each attack was not reduced but increased compared to 5 years ago. After all, the Asgard, the older the Dashen clan is, the stronger their divine power becomes. Therefore, Thanos must use his body to block Thor's attack, which also gives the mage on one side, Iron Man, a chance to deal damage. I saw fire coming out of the propellers on Iron Man's feet, and while Thanos was resisting Thor, he flew to the sky above his back, and fired lasers containing powerful energy from both hands to hit Thanos in the back of the head. Although these two lasers were fired from the palm cannon, they were no less powerful than the previous chest cluster cannon, and were even much more powerful. But even with such a powerful attack, Thanos just raised the Tyrant Sword to block it after repelling Thor. Even if Iron Man increased the energy output, he could not break the Tyrant Sword's defense. Tony, you seem to be having a hard time fighting. At this time, Rhodes' voice suddenly sounded from the steel armor. Immediately, I saw a huge steel armor with tail flames coming, suspended in midair, showing off the various missiles and cannons it carried, and wildly hitting Thanos, who was resisting Iron Man's laser. It turns out that this time, because of the prompts from Captain America and Iron Man, all Avengers members were ready for battle. Rhodes also wore the latest suits and raised his vigilance to the highest level, so there was no appearance like in the movie. In such a predicament, he rushed out of the ruins with the others and came to help the 3 Iron Man men. Boom! As an explosion sounded, thick smoke instantly rose up where Thanos had been standing. The 3 Iron Man men also retreated and joined Rhodes and Ant-Man. What should we do next? Captain. Rhodes looked at the thick smoke that lingered there for a long time and asked Captain America. Although he didn't know the legendary law of no harm in smoke, he also knew that Thanos would definitely not be able to be defeated by his own firepower, so he hurriedly asked for tactical guidance from Captain America now. When Captain America heard Rhodes' words, he instinctively wanted to say, together, but he also understood that the situation in front of him could not be solved by uniting, so he held it back. After glancing at the teammates around him, Captain America suddenly caught a glimpse of the gloves inlaid with infinity stones held by Hawkeye in his arms. He also thought of Ned's warnings again and again, and couldn't help but secretly thought, what on earth is Carol doing? Why is she nowhere to be seen at every critical moment? Single quote. Everyone's attention was on Captain America at the moment. When they saw Captain America's eyes falling on the Infinity Gauntlet, they immediately understood what he was thinking. Let me do it this time. The God of Thunder said without hesitation. That's all we can do. Captain America looked at Thor's solemn expression and nodded. No. At this moment, Banner, who had lost one arm, suddenly interrupted everyone, let me do it. Now that we have disrupted the multiverse, no one knows what will happen next. Thor is the strongest among us. He must be in the best condition. At least he cannot suffer irreparable damage from the gem. Originally, Thor was angry that Banner stopped him from snapping his fingers again, but he fell silent after listening to Banner's words. Well, finally, Saul nodded helplessly. Then, come on. Drink. At this moment, a roar suddenly erupted from the thick smoke in the distance, and then Thanos' tyrant butcher knife was seen shooting out of the thick smoke, heading straight towards the Avengers. What? Seeing this, Thor threw out his Mjolnir without any sign of weakness, and there was a bang sound as the two collided. Thor's hammer was directly knocked away by the tyrant's butcher's sword. Then the tyrant's butcher's sword slowed down slightly, but it still flew towards the crowd, heading straight for Hawkeye, who was holding the Infinity Stones. At the same time, Thanos also ran out of the smoke and rushed toward everyone with crazy steps. Don't even think about it. When Thor saw that his Mjolnir was no match for Thanos' broken knife, he was immediately furious. In a trance, he seemed to see his late father again, with that one eye full of majesty and wisdom looking deeply at him. When Thor came back to his senses, he felt his divine power surge. He shouted loudly, mobilized all his divine power, and jumped up with the storm axe in hand. I saw that Thor's whole body was covered with the power of thunder and lightning. Lightning flashed out of his eyes, and the lightning burst from the storm axe in his hand was several meters high. Drink. With a loud shout, Thor, the god of thunder, finally struck out with his most powerful axe in the past 5 years. Boom. In just one blow, Thanos' tyrant butcher knife was knocked away and flew to an unknown destination. Suffer death. After knocking Thanos' weapon away, Thor, with the power of thunder and lightning flowing all over his body, suddenly became more confident and went straight to Thanos with his axe. Thanos' eyes twitched when he saw Thor in this state, and he hurriedly stopped. Because he ran too fast, he plowed 2 deep ravines on the ground with his feet. Die. At this time, Thor had also arrived in front of Thanos. He swung the storm axe in his hand at a very fast speed and took Thanos' head directly. Although in terms of height, cutting the body is the most convenient way for Thor to attack, but this is obsession. Although Thor's attack power is unparalleled in the world, he is too fat after all. Although his speed is still very fast for people on Earth, he is still almost useless in front of someone like Thanos, who is also the top powerhouse in the universe. He swayed slightly backward to avoid the killing blow from the God of Thunder. While avoiding Thor's attack, Thanos raised his right hand, much like Thor who summoned Thor's hammer. Obviously, he was summoning the tyrant's butcher knife. But it may be because the tyrant butcher's knife was shot too far away by Thor, and it has yet to be seen. What? In an instant, Thor jumped up, and another axe struck from top to bottom. Thanos hurriedly retreated to dodge. Thanos' retreat was in line with Thor's intention. He was seen spinning rapidly, and the storm axe in his hand brought out a series of electric lights, slashing at Thanos like a super top. Stab. Crack. As soon as the Euro axe strike hit Thanos' armor, bursts of sparks erupted, and then the armor on Thanos' body was split into pieces with a click, and the power was not reduced as it cut into Thanos' purple body. What? Just as Thanos was about to be cut in half, the tyrant's butcher knife finally flew from a distance and fell into Thanos' hands. What? The tyrant butcher knife was in hand. Thanos endured the pain and kept pulling it down, trying to interrupt Thor's rotation. At the same time, he was slightly confused. The moment he took the tyrant butcher knife, it seemed much lighter than before. Phew. Boom. Crack. Thanos' move happened to jam Thor's storm axe, and the two were locked in a stalemate. A wound about 1 foot deep and 2 feet long across Thanos' abdomen was seen, with purple blood flowing continuously. Seeing it directly makes people feel pity. At the same time, Thanos finally understood why he felt that the tyrant's butcher knife was much lighter just now. Following Thanos' gaze, I saw that the originally huge and majestic double-edged tyrant butcher knife now had a gap as big as 3 Thor's hammers. The original double-edged knife had become a single-edged knife, and half of it was chopped off. The good whirlwind machete was chopped into the Taoist priest's 4-eyed sword by the thunder god's axe. Thanos was furious when he saw this. It happened that Thor's combo was interrupted at this time, and most of the anger he had finally mustered was released, and his power was suddenly reduced. What? Thanos roared and raised the tyrant's butcher knife, flying the god of thunder directly. Then he jumped up and stabbed Thor from top to bottom, who had just fallen to the ground and had no time to dodge. Seeing that Thor was about to die under Thanos' tyrant butcher's knife, Thanos' expression suddenly froze, and then slowly turned into sand and drifted away. Thor stood up in confusion and looked up to see Thanos' spaceship also turning into sand and being blown away by the wind. Seeing this, Thor hurriedly turned back to look at Captain America and the others, and sure enough, he saw them forming a circle, surrounding Dr. Green Banner in the middle. Among them, Tony Stark's hand armor kept spraying mist on Banner's arm. Apparently Banner snapped his fingers when Thor was fighting Thanos. Seeing this, Thor slowly walked up to them and looked at Banner, who was lying on the ground with both arms useless and a look of pain on his face. He seemed to have lost most of his life. He was speechless for a long time. Captain, on your left. At this moment, Falcon's voice suddenly sounded in Captain America's headset. Immediately after the sound of stab, one after another huge portals with sparks slowly opened, among which the Falcon was the first to fly out, followed by other Avengers superheroes who disappeared under the snap of fingers. In addition, Karma Taj and Asgard also arrived with many fighting forces through the portal. Among them, Asgard led by Valkyrie led the entire country to arrive. Finally, a portal opened, and the members of the Guardians of the Galaxy on Titan, this world's Spider-Man Peter Parker, and Doctor Strange also appeared one by one, but Doctor Strange's face was a little confused. Gradually, everyone arrived. Wakanda and Asgard's armies stood together, and at a glance, they could not see the edge. Where is the enemy? The enemy has. Crack Kacha. Boom. Just as Captain America was about to say that the enemy had been defeated, there was a clicking sound in the sky, and then with a bang, a robot full of strange aura appeared out of thin air, and around him was the multiverse that was slowly being repaired. Barrier. The breath of life. The robot was suspended in the air and murmured softly. "Oh, Ultron." Tony Stark looked at the robot in the air in disbelief and said, "It's not important. Look at what's on his chest." Captain America's voice even trembled when he spoke. When everyone heard the sound, they saw 5 Infinity Stones, purple, green, blue, orange and red, neatly arranged on Ultron's chest, adding a bit of intimidation to his huge body. This is impossible. Okay. Perhaps hearing the comments from the people below, Ultron let out a sigh and lowered his head, looking at the countless Earth defense forces below that were originally prepared to deal with Thanos. "Okay, now it's barbecue time. Isn't it really cool for you to be wearing such a strange mask all the time?" In 2012, on the first floor of Stark Tower, Tony Stark, who had recovered from Ant-Man's prank, looked at Ned, who had been wearing a mask, and said, "I." Just as Ned was about to speak, his body suddenly turned into reality, and then continued to change between reality, and even his voice became ethereal. "Mage, what's going on?" Everyone in the Avengers who had just experienced a big battle was obviously frightened. When they saw Ned in this situation, they all took out their weapons and protected Stark, who had taken off his armor, behind them, and looked at Ned warily, asked. At the same time, Hawkeye also bent his bow and arrow, pointing directly at Loki. "Did you do it yourself?" Although everyone was worried about Ned's situation, since Ned had just demonstrated the ability to become blurred and disappear instantly, they were still taking chances. Maybe it was just Ned seeing that the battle was over, so he planned to leave. No. Yes. Ned had never experienced such a situation, and he was inevitably a little panicked. He hurriedly wanted to open the portal and ask Ancient One for help. However, before he could do anything, Ned disappeared after a flash of light. "Mage." Captain America looked at where Ned was standing and said tentatively. "Ah." Ultron looked at the unusually conspicuous Iron Man Tony Stark below, and felt an unknown fire burst into flames. The next moment, he would mobilize the power of the Infinity Stones to completely destroy all life on Earth. The colorful brilliance suddenly bloomed, and at the same time, there was a faint yellow light shining through Ultron's forehead, which was the reaction of mobilizing the 6 Infinity Stones at the same time. "Boss, a super strong energy reaction has been detected, which is very similar to the energy of snapping fingers just now." At this time, Tony Stark below also received a reminder from Friday. Shet. As the maker of Ultron, Stark didn't know where the Ultron in front of him came from, but he understood Ultron's plan in an instant and couldn't help but cursed, but it was obviously too late to stop Ultron at this time. Can only watch in despair as the brilliance of Ultron becomes more and more prosperous. Crack. Dang dang. At this moment, suddenly another crack in the multiverse barrier appeared in the sky above Ultron, and then a round body wrapped in a red cloak appeared out of thin air, hitting Ultron with a bang, interrupting his spellcasting, and then feebly moving toward the ground fell. That is, Doctor Strange, who was suspended above the crowd below, looked at the red cloak wrapped around Ned who was falling straight down, and let out a soft breath of disbelief. At the same time, whether it was an illusion or something, he seemed to feel the cloak on his back moving slightly. Okay. Ned finally came to his senses in midair. Fortunately, the levitating cloak on his back had its own intelligence and had dragged him to the Avengers. Otherwise, he had just regained consciousness and would not have had time to use magic to stabilize his body. "It's you." Captain America finally breathed a sigh of relief after seeing Ned, glanced at Ultron above, and said in a solemn tone, "Is this the crisis you said we must use the Infinity Stones to deal with?" Captain America's words made Tony, who was about to ask Strange if he was the 1 in 14 million this time, stopped and asked for the Infinity Gauntlet from Hawkeye, his eyes full of determination. After hearing Captain America's words, Ned glanced at the infinite Ultron in the sky and felt tens of thousands of alpacas flying past in his heart. "It won't work if you say it." After struggling for a long time, Ned finally said this. Then he encouraged himself, snatched the Infinity Gauntlet from Tony's hand, and preemptively said, "Look, are you able to withstand the power of this gauntlet?" As Ned spoke, he didn't stop moving his hands at all. He grabbed the red reality stone from above, and then the red magic circle floated out of his palm, and the magic aura slowly floated towards himself and Thor. Okay. Although Thor didn't know Ned, He knew from the reactions of Captain America and Tony that this was his comrade, so he had no defense against him and no resistance. He was just a little confused about what kind of witchcraft Ned had cast on him. As soon as Thor was about to ask the question, he felt that his body seemed to have become lighter, as if a heavy burden had been lifted off. Ned's body also became visibly stronger, and in a short time he became a muscular man like Captain America. All the fat on his body completely disappeared without a trace. "Ah, so, you grabbed my gloves just to lose weight." Tony Stark's voice of doubting life came out from the steel armor. Others on the scene were also a little dissatisfied with Ned's random use of the infinite stones because they were unfamiliar with Ned. "No, don't look at unfathomable magic with your mortal eyes." After hearing what Stark said, Ned replied, 5 years ago, Thor could almost kill Thanos with one axe. Why can't he do it now? Quote. Thor didn't know why he was shot while lying down, but because Ned was trying to lose weight for him, he didn't care about it. "Hey, witch." Ned ignored everyone, called Wanda and threw the reality stone towards her. Okay. Wanda used the red power of chaos to catch the reality stone in the air, and then looked at Ned in confusion, wondering what he was doing by throwing such an important thing to her. "Try to use this stone with your superpowers." At this time, Wanda and others still didn't know what her power was, and they just thought it was the superpower from the Mind Stone, so Ned followed their ideas. "Ultron has 6 Infinity Stones, and only the stones can fight against the stones," Ned said. "But compared to Ultron, none of us can withstand the power of 6 Infinity Stones unscathed. Even if it could, the Infinity Gauntlet designed by Stark cannot allow people to fully unleash the power of gems at will. It can only be used to snap fingers. So, I chose to use the method of separating the infinite gems, but this requires us to be careful later and not give Ultron a chance to activate 6 gems at once and directly turn us into ashes." As Ned spoke, he did not stop moving his hands at all. Regardless of Tony's dark expression after hearing his words, he took down 2 more gems one after another. "Saul." Ned threw the 2 gems of power and space to Thor and said, "Slap them on your weapons." Strange. Next came the Time Stone. Although Ned also wanted to try using it, he knew that Strange was 10 times more familiar with the Time Stone than he was, so he stopped thinking about it and threw the Time Stone to him decisively. "Don't disgrace the name of the Supreme Mage." With these words, Ned put the Infinity Gauntlet on his right hand. At this time, there were only 2 gems left on it, the Mind Stone and the Soul Stone. Of course, Ned was not affected at all. "Hey, why didn't you give me the Mind Stone? I thought I was more suitable for it," Wanda asked at this time. "Because your ability combined with the power of the Reality Stone allows you to modify reality at will in an instant. And your use of the Mind Stone is nothing more than casting illusions to confuse the soul. This is insignificant to Ultron, who also has the Mind Stone." Well, Wanda said no more. Ned looked around at everyone, and finally looked at Thor and said, "Use the power of the space gem to send everyone away except us. They are of no use here, but may be killed. Spread." "Hey, what do you mean?" Tony Stark said at this time. He was not assigned the Infinity Stones, and he had nothing to say about that, since others were clearly able to use them better than him. But now Ned actually wanted to leave the battlefield, which was simply unbearable. Although at first he didn't want to get involved in these things for the sake of Pepper Potts and Morgan, so he also rejected the invitation from Captain America and others to build a time machine. But now the battle has begun, and the opponent is still Ultron, who was born in his hand. Although he doesn't know where his infinite stones came from, he can never get rid of his Stark brand. And now, facing this Stark product, the magician in front of him actually wants to escape. Okay, leave Stark." As he spoke, Ned took another look at the fighting forces around him, leave Stark and Captain behind, and send everyone else away, without exception. Okay. Thor had no objection to this. The space gem on the storm battle axe bloomed with bright blue light. The next moment, the blue light spread across the entire battlefield, directly sending back the people who had been teleported by Master Kamar. Among them it also includes Asgard's army and Kamar-Taj's mage team. Okay. Ned looked at Strange again and said, "Give us all a buff, just like the one you negotiated with Dormammu." Strange took a deep look at Ned, then nodded, urging the time gem to bloom with magical green light, and then a series of green magic circles appeared, and after shrinking, they were put on everyone's arms. You have to know that Ultron also has the Time Stone. He can easily destroy my magic. Strange warned Ned. Yes, but it takes time, and we won't give him time. Ned nodded, then looked at Ultron in the sky and said, "Let's go up, guys." What? After Ned finished speaking, Thor shouted and threw the storm axe out. The moment the storm axe took off his hand, there was a flash of blue light and disappeared, followed by Thor's hammer, which glowed purple and flew towards Ultron with a roaring sound. At the same time, two magic circles, yellow and orange, appeared on Ned's gloves. Although Stark's gloves cannot directly use gems, don't forget, he is a mage. Ah, sizzling, sizzling. As Ned's magic circle was revealed, Ultron's system suddenly went into chaos, and the indicator lights on his eyes flashed. Obviously there was an internal problem. But it was Ned who was trying to use the power of the Mind Stone to interfere with the robots in this system, which were also built based on the Mind Stone. At the same time, the power of the Soul Gem also began to penetrate subtly. It turns out that Ned planned to use the power of the Soul Gem to create a consciousness similar to Vision in Ultron's body, so as to cause conflicts between them from within and give Ned and others outside an opportunity. Well, however, all this came to nothing after Ultron groaned, because the heart and soul gems in his chest also burst out with yellow and orange light, which lasted for a long time. Not only did Ned feel no regrets when he saw this, but he said in surprise, "Guys, I have contained the two gems of Ultron." After the words fell, his body flashed, and Ned transformed into a clone and rushed towards Ultron, while the main body kept urging the magic circle of the Mind Stone and the Soul Stone to interfere with Ultron, so that he could no longer use it. Two gems to go somewhere else. Dwang. In the short moment when Ultron and Ned were entangled, Mjolnir with terrifying power had also arrived. The hammer with purple light knocked Ultron out of sight with one strike. It is the power of the Power Stone. You all deserve to die. Before everyone could feel happy about this, a blue space channel opened in midair, and Ultron's penetrating voice came intermittently from it. Then I saw him staggering out, with a deep dent in his chest, exactly in the shape of Thor's hammer, and even the Infinity Stones almost collapsed. Boom. Ultron had just walked out of it, and before he could make any move, he was caught off guard by the sudden appearance of the Storm Tomahawk. The Storm Tomahawk carrying the power of space directly cut Ultron in half, and then whirled down in the sky, into the hands of Thor. Ha, that's it. Thor exhaled, holding Mjolnir and Storm Axe in his left and right hands respectively, shrugged, and said with a nonchalant expression, "Why do I feel that he is not as powerful as before?" Tony and Captain America also had the same expression. They were originally in despair when they saw Ultron collecting all the Infinity Stones. Who knew that this guy would die so hastily? Shet. Button the gem. Unlike Thor and the others, Ned not only did not relax when faced with this situation, but instead shouted angrily at everyone, and then quickly ran towards Ultron's body that fell to the ground. Boom. Before Ned could arrive, Ultron's body suddenly erupted with various brilliance, directly ejecting Ned. Then the rest of the light gradually faded away, leaving only green and red brilliance intertwined. The next moment, the intact Ultron slowly stood up and was suspended in the air again. I have to say, you guys really surprised me, but that's it for now. Ultron's penetrating voice sounded again. As the voice fell, the 6 Infinity Stones glowed at the same time. Looking at the face of the somewhat weird steel armor below that was reflected by the light of the Infinite Stones, Ultron looked at the one inside. Tony Stark said, "I only need one thought to destroy a galaxy. Ah, sizzle, sizzle. You won't succeed." Quietly, the battlefield was shrouded in a strange red light. Scarlet Witch Wanda was suspended in the air, her eyes glowing red, holding the Reality Stone with the power of chaos in her hand, facing Ultron and saying, "The world we bought with illusions, no destruction allowed." As she spoke, Wanda glanced at Ned, who had been activating the Mind Stone and Soul Stone below, and said, "I used my superpower to interfere with his power. Now he can't confront your two gems head on." Such a system in such confusion, he was unable to form any clear thoughts. Good job. Ned did not hesitate to praise Wanda. "Thanos is dead, and you will bear my wrath in his place." Wanda's voice fell, and the powerful chaos magic rushed towards Ultron with the blessing of the Reality Stone, and a strange red light illuminated the entire battlefield. What? Unwilling to be defeated by Wanda, Ultron roared and forcibly mobilized the power of the Infinite Stones. Purple energy light waves appeared instantly, collided with Wanda's chaotic magic, and became stalemate. At the same time, Ultron's reality stone continued to flash, apparently trying to use his own to counteract Wanda's power. But unfortunately, with the blessing of chaos magic, Wanda's power cannot be offset by Ultron at all. Boom. Everyone watching the confrontation between Wanda and Ultron was agitated, and they felt that their attacks contained terrifying world-destroying power. But at this moment, Ned suddenly shouted to the Starks, "Don't be stunned. Help Wanda. She's on the left." Walter. Although Tony and others didn't know the reason for losing to Bozuo since ancient times, they also understood that Ned asked them to help Wanda. It happened that they didn't have the idea of martial ethics, so they all took action together. Friday. Maximum power. Stark was the first to strike, with 2 palm cannons and a chest reactor bursting out intense light at Ultron at the same time. Immediately afterwards, 2 magic circles appeared on the hands of Ned's clone, shooting 2 magic light waves towards Ultron. Strange. Dr. Strange heard Ned's shout and immediately understood what he meant. Without saying a word, he also shot 2 magic light waves, which merged with Ned's light wave halfway, and the power increased exponentially. Ah! Seeing that everyone had taken action, Thor roared and took out the storm axe in his hand, slashing at Ultron again through the power of space, this time aimed at the head. Boom! Boom! The powerful energy hit Ultron almost at the same time, loud noises erupted, and the location where Ultron was originally was instantly enveloped in strong light. "Did you make it?" Captain America, who was watching the whole show, asked softly. "It's not that easy." The mind and soul gems in Ned's hands were still functioning, and he replied solemnly. "What?" At this moment, Wanda suddenly let out a scream in midair. Ned and others looked around hurriedly and saw that Ultron had appeared behind Wanda at some point, and his right hand had penetrated Wanda's heart. "No, it's a space gem." Ned immediately realized that Ultron must have used the space gem to teleport behind Wanda at the moment when their attack was about to hit, and shot and injured Wanda. Boom. Ultron kicked the weak Wanda down from the air, shook off the blood on his hand and said, "Haha, is that all you have?" At this time, without Wanda's interference, Ultron can speak fluently again. "Catch the reality stone." Captain America, who was originally going to catch Wanda, heard Ned's shout and glanced at the red gem that fell naturally from midair. He gritted his teeth and looked away from Wanda. He turned around and jumped up, using his shield to hold the reality gem with a slight leap. "Catch it firmly." Everyone in the Avengers had met to discuss the Infinity Stones, so Captain America naturally knew not to touch them directly with his palms. Seeing Captain America go to pick up the reality stone, Ned's clone jumped into the air decisively, caught Wanda in the air and slowly fell down. "Hey, hold on. Don't sleep." Ned's clone squatted on the ground, held Wanda in his arms, patted her cheek gently and shouted, "Don't sleep." While Ned was shouting, he suddenly felt that his palm was grabbed by someone. He looked at Wanda again, her eyes were wide open, and there was no sign of her dying. Looking down, he saw that the hole originally poked by Ultron in the heart had been completely restored with a little green light, and even the clothes were as clean as ever. "Let me go," Wanda said. Oh. Ned hurriedly helped Wanda up and said, "So, are you okay?" 3 grams of oil. Wanda left such words, flew down next to Captain America again, took the reality stone, and said no more. Hateful. Seeing that the person he had finally beaten to death recovered in the blink of an eye, Ultron glanced at Strange fiercely, and when he was about to speak, he was thrown to the ground by a golden lady who suddenly fell from the sky. "Listen, robot monster, I've seen the Terminator movie, but I don't think there's a need for a second one." Captain Marvel muttered something while punching Ultron one after another. "Hey, button the gem," Ned shouted. "You do have some strength." Ultron's body is made of vibranium, so he is naturally not afraid of Captain Marvel's ordinary punches and kicks, he said with a sneer. At the same time, I was secretly glad in my heart that compared to the previous perverts, this was a tough fight. "You lose." Captain Marvel didn't know whether he didn't hear Ned's voice or was overconfident. He didn't pay attention to the gem's meaning at all. He pressed Ultron's head with one hand and said domineeringly, "Please like my videos and subscribe for more videos."